Chapter 523. After thinking for a long time, Xian Jizi looked at Li Mu and said solemnly, "How about I give up my position earlier? I believe that under your leadership, Lu's school will become better and better." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "My cultivation is low and not enough to convince the others. Senior brother, you should be the headmaster for now." As a member of the Lu school, the Lu school had treated him well and had even given him the treasure of the school. Even if he had to spend a lot of precious resources and could only help the two Taishang elders live for another 3 years, Li Mu would not hesitate. Although asking the Empress and Phantom Princess for help was a bit of a freeloader, if the Empress was willing, Li Mu could be hers and there was no need to be so calculative. As for Phantom Princess, Li Mu had helped her so many times, so it would not be too much for her to help Li Mu once, right? The Empress said that after the materials were gathered, she would have Mr. May send it over. Li Mu did not think about it earlier and only now realized that he needed the help of a level 7 primordial spirit to write the Lu. If Mr. May sent it over, wouldn't he be possessed by Xian Jizi again? If he had a choice, of course he would want the Empress to possess him. So Li Mu took out the spirit snail again and told the Empress that there was no need to trouble Mr. May to make another trip. He would go back to Shendu to write the talisman himself. Before that, he had to go to the Yao Kingdom. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing stayed in the sect for the time being. Although the Empress had already reserved the Emperor's Qi for them, not everyone could be like the Empress, who could rely on the Emperor's Qi to reach level 7 when they were only level 5. Before her, the Shao royal clan had used large amounts of resources to forcefully push the Emperor or the Crown Prince to the 6th realm for safety reasons. Only then would they begin to inherit the Emperor's Qi. The two Grand Supreme Elders' 7th realm cultivations were so majestic that even if only a tenth of their Qi remained, they could still forcefully push the Creation realm cultivator to the see-through realm. In the history of Lu school, quite a few heads had been promoted this way. Although the two Grand Shang Elders had the intention of passing on their power to Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, Li Mu still did his best to do what he should do as a disciple of the Lu school. The North County was not far from the Demon Nation. After a few hours, Li Mu had already appeared in the Thousand Fox Nation. Phantom Princess had already told Fox 6 to prepare the herbs that Li Mu needed. She asked Li Mu, "Is this enough? If it's not enough, you can go to the treasury and pick." "Enough, enough." Li Mu waved his big sleeve, and the pile of spirit herbs disappeared on the spot. He looked at Illusion Princess and said, "Thank you." Huan Ji rolled her eyes and said, "Why are you being so polite with me?" Li Mu said, "These things are very important to me. It's all thanks to you. Continue with your work. I'll go back first." Before he could fly up, Illusion Princess grabbed his wrist. She frowned and looked at him. She said, "You want to leave after taking things? How can there be someone like you? Also, it's already dark. Can't you stay for a night before leaving?" Li Mu thought about it carefully and realized that it was not very good for him to do this. After taking such precious things, what was the difference between saying thank you and those scumbags who took a girl's body and ran away? He looked at the completely dark sky and said, "Then I'll sleep for a night." It was Li Mu's room in the harem. Phantom Princess had Fox 6 bring in a few dishes. Li Mu had not eaten all day, but just as he picked up his chopsticks, the Empress's spirit snail vibrated again. Li Mu made a shushing gesture to Phantom Princess and then picked up the spirit snail. The Empress asked from the other side, "Have you eaten?" Just this one sentence showed that their relationship was not the same as before. The Empress used to use the spirit snail to summon him, and she would always find some excuse, such as discussing national affairs or giving advice on cultivation. But now, she was so direct. With the Empress's personality, what was the difference between "Have you eaten" and "I miss you"? It seemed that his strategy for the Empress was starting to work. Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm eating." Phantom Princess suddenly felt that her throat was uncomfortable again. She covered her mouth and coughed a few times. Cough, cough. The Empress's voice changed immediately. "Didn't you say that something happened at Lu school and you secretly went to see that fox spirit again?" Li Mu explained, "Your Majesty misunderstood. I only came to Thousand Fox Country to get some spirit medicine to make the talisman liquid for the talisman of Tianji. Tomorrow morning, I will leave for Shendu, Zhou Yi whispered. I didn't give you enough. You still need to find that fox, Phantom Princess snorted and said. Unfortunately, I don't have anything here, but I have a lot of spirit medicine. If you don't have any more spirit medicine, come find me. Zhou Yi directly asked Li Mu, when is that fox leaving? I want to talk to you alone. Phantom Princess said unhappily, you're the one who interrupted our meal. You should be the one leaving. Li Mu was in a dilemma. He had taken both the Empress and Phantom Princess's gifts, so no matter which one he sided with, he would be letting the other down. He put down his chopsticks and said, I have been running around for 2 days. I want to rest. Phantom Princess, you can go back first. Her Majesty should rest early too. Phantom Princess heard this and could only leave. After she left, Li Mu took out the spirit snail again and whispered, Your Majesty, she left. Zhou Yi said unhappily, I told you to stop looking for that fox. You didn't listen to me. She doesn't have good intentions towards you, Li Mu said. Your Majesty, don't worry. I will be careful. Without Phantom Princess's interruption, Li Mu and Queen's conversation became more casual. They talked about how they would live in seclusion in the fields and grow vegetables. At this time, Li Mu did not notice that compared to the last time he slept here, there was an extra decorative clam shell at the head of his bed. At the head of Phantom Princess's bed, there was also a clam shell that looked exactly the same. At this moment, she was sitting at the bedside and listening to the sound coming from the clam shell. However, the more she listened, the deeper her frown became. Li Mu and Zhou Qiong had actually decided to grow flowers and vegetables together in the future. What was their relationship? Could it be that Zhou Qiong had already obtained the advantage of being in a favorable position and had gotten Li Mu first? The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. When there was no sound coming from the clam shell, she immediately went back to the harem. Li Mu had just finished chatting with the Empress and was about to eat when Phantom Princess pushed the door open again. The Empress probably wouldn't call again tonight. Li Mu looked at her and asked, Do you want to eat together? Phantom Princess sat down across from Li Mu and asked in a low voice, Tell me honestly, what are your thoughts towards Zhou Yi? Li Mu thought for a long time and didn't plan to lie to her. He said, It's the thought of growing feelings over time. Phantom Princess said angrily, How can you face your wife? Li Mu said, My wife has already agreed. What? Phantom Princess was shocked. Lu Hanyan agreed to the matter between you and Zhou Yi. Is she crazy? Li Mu didn't answer, and Phantom Princess didn't need him to answer. She looked at Li Mu and asked, You have feelings for Zhou Yi over time. Then what are your feelings for me? You know that the Heavenly Fox clan will repay kindness, but you are still so good to me. You have given me a favor that I can't repay in my lifetime. What am I in your heart? Phantom Princess's expression was serious. Li Mu couldn't beat around the bush like before. The premise of growing feelings over time was to spend time with her. He and Phantom Princess didn't have long experiences together. During the longest time they spent together, he was the little snake and she was Lord Phantom Princess. No matter if it was Li Mu or her, they didn't have any feelings for each other. Now, the relationship between the two of them was that of the little snake and Lord Phantom Princess, that of the state preceptor and the queen, that of the six-tailed celestial fox and her benefactor. Their different identities were intertwined, and even Li Mu himself did not know what their relationship was. Phantom Princess naturally had an important place in his heart. But how important was it? Li Mu couldn't explain it with words. Li Mu walked to her side, grabbed her hand and placed it on his chest. He said, I don't know either. Why don't you feel it for yourself? Since he couldn't describe it with words, he would let her feel it for herself. Phantom Princess placed her hand on Li Mu's chest. She could clearly feel his emotions. She didn't know how to describe it. The only thing she knew was that she was very important in Li Mu's heart. She grabbed Li Mu's hand and placed it on her chest. She said, Feel it too. Other than the fullness, Li Mu also felt a love that could drown him. This was Phantom Princess's feelings for him. Phantom Princess looked at Li Mu and said, "You also like me, but it's not as deep as I like you. But it's okay. You'll know how good I am in the future." She sat down again and took out a bottle of wine from the storage space. She poured a cup for Li Mu and herself. She said, "I'm very happy tonight. Drink with me." Chapter 524. Who would reject the reasonable request of a woman who was full of love for him? Moreover, it was just a small matter like drinking with her. Li Mu raised the cup, and when he brought it to his mouth, he hesitated for a moment. With Huan Ji's style, Li Mu was not sure if there was anything added to the wine. Huan Ji saw the slight change in his expression and said, "What, are you afraid that I'll poison it?" She drank all the wine in her cup and then tilted the cup down. Not a single drop of wine leaked out. Li Mu did not argue and drank all the wine in one gulp. It was strange that the wine did not taste like alcohol at all. Instead, it tasted sweet. Could it be a new type of sweet wine from the Yao Kingdom? At this time, Huan Ji looked at Li Mu and said, "At the beginning, I hated you very much. I have never been bullied like this in my life. I told my father to put a bounty on you and swore that I would repay you 100 times the humiliation I suffered from you." Li Mu explained, "That time, you provoked me first. Then what about the White Emperor's cave?" Huan Ji took a deep breath and continued, "You, a man, brought people from the 6 Dao sects to bully a woman like me. You stole so many things from me and even stole the Demon Emperor's heavenly book." Li Mu said, "At that time, we were still enemies. Of course, I would not be merciful to my enemies. Later on, didn't I give you the heavenly book?" Huan Ji ignored Li Mu and continued, "Later on, something happened to my father and brother. Me and Fox 6 were hunted down. It was you who saved us. You killed Bai Xian and took back the 1,000 Fox Kingdom. You resisted the attacks of the Demon Sect and the Celestial Wolf Tribe. At that time, I knew that other than giving myself to you, I would never be able to repay your kindness in this life." Li Mu felt that his mouth was dry. It was not because of Huan Ji's sudden confession, but because he was really thirsty and his body was hot. He poured another cup of wine and chilled it with his magic power. Then, he drank all the wine in one gulp, hoping to sober himself up. Phantom Princess was still rambling. She took off her shirt and looked at Li Mu. "Don't you feel hot wearing so much?" 1,000 Fox Country was in the middle of a mountain range, and the temperature was just right. With Li Mu and Huan Ji's cultivation, they were already immune to both heat and cold, so how could they feel the heat? He immediately realized where the problem was. He pointed at the jug and said to Huan Ji, "This wine." Huan Ji looked at him with her charming eyes and asked, "Wine? What wine? Where is the wine?" Li Mu was stunned. "Then what's in the pot?" Huan Ji's face turned red as she lowered her voice and said, "This is our Fox clan's acacia water. We drink it on the night of the Heavenly Fox clan's wedding. Every time you come, you leave quickly. I don't have time to develop feelings for you, so I can only use this method." Li Mu was shocked. He lowered his head and chanted, "If the heart is as clear as ice, the sky will collapse. If the heart is as clear as ice, the sky will collapse." After chanting the clear heart chant, his heart quickly calmed down. However, his body was still unbearably hot. This chant had a miraculous effect on the heart, but it had no effect on the body. This heat and desire came from the depths of his body. Huan Ji took off her second layer of clothes and slowly walked towards Li Mu. She asked, "Since you also like me, why are you still resisting?" Li Mu clenched his teeth and said, "Feelings need to be cultivated." Huan Ji gently placed her hand on his chest and said, "It's not too late to cultivate in the future." Li Mu used his magic power to resist the desire in his heart. Huan Ji looked at him for a while and said, "I forgot to remind you. The more you use your magic power to resist, the faster the medicine will melt in your body. Feel it now, isn't your body soft?" She used her magic power that was far stronger than Li Mu's to push him onto the bed. She bit his ear and said with a seductive voice, "Just do it, inside the palace, on the roof of a certain hall." Hulu murmured, "Lord Huan Ji should succeed. That's the joyous union pill, no one below the upper realm can resist it." Hu Jiao didn't say anything. She grabbed the wine jar with one hand and drank it in one gulp. Some people were happy while others were sad. Tonight was Lord Huanji's big day. Tonight, Thousand Fox Country had another sad person. Early in the morning, Li Mu woke up from the soft bed. Huanji was already awake. She sat on the bed and combed her long hair. She looked back at Li Mu and said, "Don't worry, I will be responsible for you. As long as you are willing, you can become my empress now." Ouch! Before she finished speaking, she was pulled onto the bed. Li Mu's face darkened. He clenched his teeth and said, "Fox Demon, you asked for it." Thousand Fox Country, Imperial Palace Hall. The demon officials who had been waiting for a long time didn't see Her Majesty the Queen, but only Commander Hu Lu. Hu Lu slowly walked into the hall and said to the dozens of demon officials, "The Queen won't have morning court today. Disperse, Chengdu Changle Palace." It had been a few days since Li Mu returned to Chengdu. He brought back the materials for the second Tianji talisman from Thousand Fox Country. The two talismans that he and the Queen worked together to draw had also been taken back to Baiyin Mountain by Hyun Jinko. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing hadn't returned yet. Before the two grand elders died, they would pass on their life's knowledge and comprehension to the inner disciples. Other than Li Mu, all the core disciples of Fu Lu School had been summoned back to the mountain. Li Mu sat below the Empress, in his exclusive seat. He had already been reading a memorial for almost an hour. It wasn't that he had encountered a difficult decision, but he still couldn't accept that Huanji had forced him to lose his virginity. The Queen had warned him many times to be careful of Huanji, but Li Mu didn't take it to heart. It was too late to say anything now. He hadn't made any substantial progress with the Queen, but he had already done it with Huanji. Li Mu hadn't told Lu Hanyan and Li Qing about this yet. Because it was embarrassing. The biggest problem now wasn't Lu Hanyan and Li Qing. If the Queen knew about this, the consequences would be unimaginable. She and Huanji were like fire and water. She would definitely think that Li Mu had betrayed her. Li Mu secretly glanced at the Queen and lowered his head to continue reading the memorial. Zhou Yi also glanced at Li Mu and asked, "How did your cultivation level increase again?" "Were you?" Li Mu immediately stood up and said, "I didn't betray your majesty. The Grand Elder of Fu Lu School imparted his power to me." Zhou Yi finished speaking and looked at Li Mu again. "What did you say you betrayed?" Li Mu slowly sat down and lowered his head. "Nothing." Zhou Yi frowned and said, "I've already noticed. After returning from Thousand Fox Country, you've been absent-minded. Is that fox so attractive to you?" Li Mu's expression didn't reveal anything. He said seriously, "Your Majesty, you've misunderstood. I was just thinking that reality is so cruel. Even a 7th Realm Grand Elder can't avoid reaching the end of his lifespan." Zhou Yi said, "What's there to think about? Everyone will die one day. 180 years is already a lot. A meaningful decade is better than a century." Li Mu said slowly, "Although that's the case, isn't cultivation for longevity? Most cultivators fight for their lives and only live a few years longer than normal people. What kind of cultivation is this?" Zhou Yi didn't agree with Li Mu's words. He said calmly, "Longevity isn't necessarily a good thing. If I had to choose, as long as I can spend my mortal life with the person I love, I'd rather not have a long lifespan." Li Mu said, "I think so too." The two looked at each other. Li Mu's expression was calm. Zhou Yi quickly looked away. Li Mu sighed. They were both rulers of a country. If the Queen had half the initiative of Huanji, Ling would have a brother or sister by now. Chapter 525. After leaving Changle Palace, Li Mu went to the consecration department to take a look. Before he left, two high consecrators stopped Li Mu and asked, "Lord Li, there were two strange phenomena in the palace a few days ago." "What was that?" Li Mu answered honestly, "It was a strange phenomenon born from the talisman of heavenly secrets." The two rubbed their hands and asked nervously, "The two talismans of heavenly secrets?" Li Mu nodded and said, "That's right. They are for you. Do a good job here. When the time comes, the 2 talismans of heavenly secrets will be in your hands." Hearing this, the 2 heaved a sigh of relief and said solemnly, "Don't worry, Lord Li, don't worry, Her Majesty. We will do our best and love our job." There were still a few years before the 2 high consecrators' talismans of heavenly secrets were handed over. The Great Zhou was vast and rich in resources. A few years was enough for the imperial court to gather a few more materials, so there was no need to worry. For these high-level cultivators, the biggest enemy was their lifespan. Fu Daozi and Sanggu were in a hurry to take in disciples because they wanted to pass down their mantle and resolve their regrets before their lifespan ran out. After cultivating to the 7th realm, one's lifespan was only 180 years. Li Mu also felt that it was too short. However, the Empress was right. It was much more meaningful to spend the rest of one's life with one's loved one than to cultivate bitterly for a few years and then come out of seclusion. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing were not here. There were only Wan Wan, Xiao Bai, and a few maids at home. Li Mu usually did not have much time to accompany them alone. Today, he took the initiative to take them out for a stroll. He owed Xiao Bai the most. As his spy, Xiao Bai was so sensible that Li Mu's heart ached. She often suffered grievances herself and delivered important information for him. In the end, Li Mu still had another fox by his side. Xiao Bai still did not know. On the streets of Chengdu, Li Mu was being held by the girls. Xiao Bai and Wan Wan were chatting along the way. Suddenly, Li Mu noticed that Wan Wan stopped in her tracks and stopped talking. Li Mu tilted his head and was about to ask her what was wrong when he noticed that Wan Wan was looking in a certain direction on the street. Her face was a little pale. Li Mu followed her gaze and saw a beggar couple begging on the street. The people of Chengdu were kind and charitable. Occasionally, passers-by would take out 1 or 2 copper coins and put them in their bowls. Wan Wan stared at the beggar couple with tears in her eyes. Li Mu seemed to have realized something. He silently took Wan Wan's hand and held it tightly. The beggar couple begged for dozens of copper coins and walked into a secluded alley. The beggar couple was clearly very familiar with this alley. After more than 10 turns, they finally came to a dilapidated courtyard. The walls of the courtyard were mottled and half collapsed. The courtyard was also overgrown with weeds. Clearly, no one had lived here for a long time. Only some homeless beggars in Chengdu would use this place as a temporary residence. The 2 walked in through the collapsed wall. In the courtyard, a skinny young man in tattered clothes took the bowls from their hands. He poured the copper coins into his clothes and curled his lips. He said, "They say that the people of Chengdu are generous, but this is all there is to it. It took us so long to get this much." The woman said, "It's already quite a lot to get this in 2 hours. Don't gamble with it." The young man waved his hand and said, I know. I'll go out for a while. You can go to another place. Chengdu is so big, it's enough for us to curry favor for a few months." Watching the young man leave, the man said, "I told you not to give the money to him. He went to gamble and lost it again." The woman waved her hand and said, "If it's gone, then go ask for more. The people here are so generous, we're not afraid of not getting enough. We only have one son and we'll need him to send us off in the future." The man sighed and didn't say anything else. At this time, the woman said with some regret, "We shouldn't have lost that useless thing. If we had kept him until now, he would have been able to be sold for a high price, at least 100 taels. The man waved his hand and said, "Let's not talk about this. While it's still early, we can still get some more money today." The 2 walked out of the abandoned courtyard and walked back to the main street. At the entrance of the courtyard, 3 figures that they couldn't see stood there. Wan Wan's face was pale and her eyes were empty. More than 10 years ago, she was abandoned once. More than 10 years later, she was reunited with her biological parents. More than 10 years later, the wound in her heart that had almost healed was torn open again. Li Mu and Lu Hanyan had always doted on Wan Wan like a child and never let her come into contact with cruel things. Li Mu couldn't imagine how much pain her biological parents had caused her. He took a deep breath and pulled Wan Wan into his arms. He said, "Don't forget, you still have me and Mississippi. Xiaobai also hugged her from behind and said, me too, me too. We'll always be by your side. On a street somewhere in Chengdu. Everyone, please do a good deed, give us a copper coin to eat. Do a good deed, do a good deed, a beggar couple was begging on the street. Beggars were rare on the streets of Chengdu. There were opportunities everywhere. As long as they worked hard, they wouldn't have to beg on the street. Although the people felt that they were reaping without sowing, there would still be people who would be sympathetic and reward them with some money. The couple stood on the street and were whispering. The people on this street weren't as generous as the people on the previous street. 3 figures stopped in front of them. Standing in the middle was a man, and on either side of him was a beautiful young lady. The 3 of them were dressed luxuriously, and their auras were extraordinary. Such people were either rich or noble, and the 2 of them subconsciously bowed. The girl with an oval face on the right took out a banknote from her sleeve and put it in their bowl. Her gaze lingered on the beggar couple's faces for a long time. Then, she turned and left, never looking back. The 2 of them didn't dare to look at the girl from the beginning to the end. Their eyes were fixed on the banknote of 100 taels in the bowl. Their throats moved and they swallowed hard. Did I see wrongly? This is 100 taels. Although they heard that the people of Chengdu were generous, they didn't expect that someone would be so generous as to give 100 taels to beggars. After coming back to her senses, the woman grabbed the banknote and hid it in her sleeve. Then, the 2 of them knelt down in front of the 3 figures who were already far away. They said joyfully, "Thank you, young master. Thank you, young miss." After the 3 of them walked past them, they didn't turn back to look at them. Not long after Li Mu, Wan Wan, and Xiaobai returned home, Mr. Mei came to invite them to the palace. The Empress wanted them to eat in the palace today. Wan Wan had always been very enthusiastic about eating in the palace. However, today, she only took the plate of vegetables in front of her. She only ate a few mouthfuls of the rice that she usually ate with 3 bowls. Only Ao Qingxin ate happily. Seeing that Wan Wan didn't eat much, he took the initiative to take her bowl and said, "You don't like rice? I'll help you eat." The Empress obviously also noticed Wan Wan's abnormality. After eating, she asked Li Mu to stay in Chang'e Palace and asked, "What's wrong with Wan Wan? Did you bully her?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "Wan Wan met her parents in Chengdu today." Zhou Yi asked doubtfully, "Shouldn't she be happy about this?" Li Mu told her what happened today. Zhou Yi suddenly stood up and said angrily, "How can there be such parents in this world?" Li Mu looked at her. The Empress's parents weren't much better than Wan Wan's parents. The Empress, who felt sorry for Wan Wan, went to comfort her. Before she left, she told Li Mu to let Ao Qingxin go. She usually stayed in Chengdu and didn't go out. There was no use in keeping this dragon in the palace. There was indeed no use in keeping him. The only use was that after he entered the palace, the Empress never left behind 3 meals a day. Li Mu looked at the little female dragon who was still sitting at the table and said, "You can go back to the South Sea." Ao Qingxin raised his head. His mouth was still stuffed with food, and he looked at Li Mu with a doubtful gaze. Li Mu said, "Her Majesty has pardoned your crime. You can go back." Ao Qingxin swallowed the bulging food in his mouth, and then said, "I can't go back. Our dragon race's promise is worth 1,000 gold. We said 3 years, and it's 3 years. Not a day less." Chapter 526. Li Mu didn't want to leave, so he didn't force her. He only warned her, "You can eat whatever you want from now on, but don't steal Wan Wan's food. Otherwise, I'll send you to the border to guard South Lake. You can eat the fish and prawns in the lake." Seeing her nod, Li Mu turned and left. Wan Wan stayed in the palace for the time being. Xiaobai thought of ways to make her happy. Li Mu left the palace and came to the consecration department. 2 great consecrators came out to welcome him personally and asked, "Lord Li, do you have any orders?" Li Mu waved his sleeves, and an image appeared in the air. There were 3 figures in the image. Li Mu looked at them and said, "Send someone to Peace Square. Find these 3 beggars and send them out of the divine capital. I don't want to see them in the divine capital for the rest of my life. 15 minutes later. High up in the sky of the central region, a beggar couple and their son curled up in the corner of the flying boat. They were shocked and shivering. Great Consecrator Chen stood at the bow of the boat with a calm expression. Lord Li said he didn't want to see them in the divine capital for the rest of his life. Naturally, he would send them as far away as possible. He looked back at the 3 of them and said, "The 3 of you remember, don't step into the central region for the rest of your life." Otherwise, he didn't finish his sentence. The 3 people at the end of the boat also repeatedly kowtowed and promised. Everything that happened today was too inconceivable for them. They were already scared out of their wits and didn't even dare to ask a single question. Great Consecrator Chen didn't know what happened. He looked at the 3 of them and calculated with his fingers. He could only calculate that the 3 of them had missed a great opportunity. This opportunity was most likely related to Lord Li. If they could form a good relationship with Lord Li, even if these 3 beggars didn't have great power for the rest of their lives, they could still be very rich. Unfortunately, they didn't know what they had done to cause Lord Li to hate them so much, so they missed this opportunity. Divine Capital. It had been a few days since that incident, but Wan Wan was still unhappy. In the past few days, she had been silent and didn't eat much. Li Mu was very worried when he saw her. He had been thinking for a long time, but he still couldn't think of a good way to help Wan Wan out of this state. At this time, a sound transmission magic treasure in the storage space vibrated. After Li Mu inserted his magic power, he asked, "Senior brother, what's the matter?" Xian Jizi's voice came from the sound transmission magic treasure. Half a month later, Xuanzong of the East Sea will be holding a Taoist exchange meeting. At that time, the 6 sects of Taoism will all participate. Junior brother, do you want to take a look and increase your knowledge? Li Mu was still worried about Wan Wan. He was about to refuse when he suddenly thought of something and said, "Okay then." Although he had already ordered people to chase that family out of Fairy's capital so that Wan Wan wouldn't be reminded of sad memories, the current Fairy's capital was a sad place for her. It was hard for her to be happy if she stayed here for a long time. He might as well take this opportunity to take them out for a walk. It would also be a good chance for Wan Wan to relax. After that, Li Mu learned about the details of this exchange meeting from Xian Jizi. The Taoist exchange meeting was organized by the number 1 sect of Taoism, Xuanzong. It was held once every 5 years. At the beginning, the purpose was for Taoism cultivators to exchange their cultivation experiences and explore the mysteries of cultivation. As the leaders of Taoism, the 6 sects of Taoism would also have the powerhouses of their sects give lectures during the exchange meeting. They would selflessly contribute knowledge of weapon forging, alchemy, talisman writing, and so on. Of course, no one would reveal their cultivation experiences. The core secrets of the 6 sects were also tightly guarded and never leaked. Although it was called an exchange meeting, it was actually not very helpful for cultivation. This was for high-level cultivators. For low-level cultivators who had just entered the path of cultivation, especially those who didn't belong to any sects and were exploring alone, this kind of exchange meeting was a golden opportunity that could only be encountered by chance. The basic knowledge that the big sects disdained was also precious to them. The real reason why the 6 sects participated in the exchange meeting was not because they could exchange their cultivation experiences, but because they could exchange resources and take what they needed. The Fulu school didn't lack Fulu, but it lacked alchemy pills and magic treasures. It was the same for the other sections. In the process of trading with each other, they could also improve their relationship. In the Changle Palace, Li Mu explained the situation to the Empress. Ao Qingxin had been listening for a long time. He stood up and volunteered, "Take me with you. You can ride on me. It's more convenient and comfortable than taking the flying boat." This little female dragon who had never seen the world obviously wanted to take the opportunity to see the colorful world. However, what she said was not wrong. Riding on her was much more comfortable than taking the flying boat. Moreover, it didn't consume their own magic power. It only took a meal to fly 1,000 miles. There was another advantage to taking her. Xuanzong was on the East Sea. With her, they could also see the underwater world with Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. As long as Li Mu didn't go to the demon nation, the Empress had no objections. Moreover, the main purpose of this trip was to take Wan Wan to relax and help her resolve the knot in her heart. She approved Li Mu's leave without any hesitation. Half a month later, in the East County of the Great Zhou. Since a month ago, many cultivators had begun to gather in the East County. Xuanzong held the exchange conference every 5 years. For these individual cultivators, it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. They either hoped to hear the teachings of the powerhouses from the 6 sects or wanted to exchange for some useful items for cultivation. Xuanzong was on the East Sea, nearly 1,000 miles away from the East County. Cultivators above the 4th realm could cross this distance with their magic power. For those below the 4th realm, even if they learned how to fly, their magic power couldn't sustain it. Most of them chose to travel by boat. Some merchant ships in the East County didn't waste such an opportunity. They carried these cultivators between the coast of the East County and Xuanzong. Not only could they make a lot of money, but they could also get a group of guards with powerful magic power for free to protect them from the invasion of the Wa pirates. The exchange conference was about to begin. On the East Sea, there were more than 10 times more merchant ships than usual. The sun was shining brightly, and the sea and sky were the same color. Several figures stood on the deck, their faces full of longing and excitement. Xuanzong, the leader of the 6 Taoist sects, was the holy land in the hearts of countless Taoist cultivators. They only had the opportunity to get close to this place during the exchange conference every 5 years. In the crowd, a middle-aged man looked to the east and murmured, "I've been in the Jushen realm for 5 years. I hope I can encounter an opportunity this time and reach the transcendent realm." A young woman hugged a small bag tightly, hoping to use this precious spiritual medicine she found by chance to exchange for a protective immortal robe from the market. Another man held a broken flying sword in his hand. He breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I've finally gathered enough spiritual jades to exchange for a flying sword." On the surface of the sea, merchant ships sailed slowly. Occasionally, streams of light would streak across the sky and pass over their heads. Soon, they disappeared from sight. The people on the merchant ships looked at the figures in the streams of light with envy in their eyes. Those were the true powerhouses of the cultivation world. The realm of those seniors was the goal of most of them. "Look, what's that?" Suddenly, someone pointed to the sky. Everyone looked in the direction of his finger and saw a huge spirit ship sailing across the sky. There were many figures on the spirit ship. The speed of this spirit ship was much faster than their merchant ships. Soon, it disappeared into the horizon. Someone who was knowledgeable immediately recognized the origin of the spirit ship. He said, "It's the spirit ship of the Northern Sect. The Northern Sect's refining technique is the best in the Taoist sections. I hope to buy a high-grade Dharma treasure from the Northern Sect in this exchange conference." In every exchange conference, other than being able to listen to the Tao lectures of powerhouses for free, the thing that these itinerant cultivators looked forward to the most was being able to exchange for Fu Lu, pills, Dharma treasures, and other items from the 6 Taoist sects. The names Fu Lu School, Elixir Sect, and Northern Sect were a guarantee of quality. Everyone was on the merchant ships. Along the way, countless powerhouses flew over their heads. The light from their Dharma treasures was an eye-opener for them. Many of the youths who were participating in the exchange conference for the first time had a strange look in their eyes. At a certain moment, another ray of light appeared at the end of the horizon behind them. Under the gazes of the crowd, a huge white dragon roared from behind. Immediately, a series of exclamations erupted on the merchant ships. "Oh my God, what am I seeing? The dragon race. It's actually the dragon race. I've only seen the dragon race in books. Look, there are figures on the dragon race." When the huge dragon flew closer, they were shocked to discover that there were 3 figures standing on the huge dragon's head. From afar, they should be a man and 2 women. When everyone saw that, they were all stunned. Along the way, they had seen people riding swords, people riding boats, people flying in the sky, but they had never seen anyone riding a dragon. The dragon race was the most powerful and arrogant race in the world, yet it was used as a mount. Then, what kind of identity and strength did the person who rode a dragon as a mount have? Splash! The huge dragon flew over their heads. When it reached a certain part of the sea, it dived back into the water and never appeared again. While the cultivators on the surface of the sea were discussing, a different kind of scenery was under the sea. The dragon race was the master of the water race. Under Ao Isan's summons, all kinds of creatures in the sea quickly gathered here. The huge whales swam slowly, the dolphins shuttled through the water, and the ferocious sharks became very obedient and swam around them. Li Mu looked at Wan Wan and Xiao Bai who were playing with the fishes. When he saw Wan Wan's face light up with a bright smile, he heaved a long sigh of relief. Chapter 527. On the surface of the East Sea, there was a gentle breeze. 4 figures emerged from the water without a single trace of water on them. Wan Wan and Little White's faces were flushed. This was their first time seeing the sea, and it was also their first time seeing the beautiful underwater world. The beautiful scene just now had clearly left an indelible impression in their hearts. Actually, it was not just them. It was also Li Mu's first time seeing such a beautiful scenery. Although he had been to the aquarium in his previous life, how could the feeling through the thick glass compare to being at the bottom of the sea? Li Mu looked at the blushing Wan Wan and said gently, "You don't owe them anything anymore. Forget about those unhappiness. There are still many beautiful things in this world that are worth discovering." Wan Wan reached out and hugged Li Mu gently. She leaned her head on his chest and said softly, "Thank you, young master." Then, she took the initiative to separate from Li Mu. A faint smile appeared on her face, and the haze in the depths of her eyes also disappeared. Looking at Wan Wan, who had matured a lot in an instant, Li Mu felt both heartache and happiness. He felt heartache because she had used the betrayal of her family twice in exchange for her ultimate growth. He was happy because she had finally walked out of the trauma of her childhood. After giving Wan Wan a deep hug, Li Mu Ruang transformed back into a human form. He put away his dragon horns and retracted his dragon aura. Then, he brought the 3 girls and flew towards an area shrouded in clouds and mist. Xuanzong was located on the East Sea. It was isolated from the rest of the world and did not interact with the outside world often. Only at the Taoist conference held every 5 years would Xuanzong unveil a corner of its hidden veil. No one knew how powerful Xuanzong was, but everyone knew that compared to Fulu, elixirs, array formations, and so on, divine arts were the orthodox Taoism. And Xuanzong was famous for its divine arts. Among the 6 Taoist sects, the other 5 sects typically only had 2 to 3 7th realm experts. Xuanzong had a total of 5 7th realm elders. There were even rumors in the outside world that Xuanzong still had 8th realm experts who had yet to perish. When Li Mu and the 3 girls flew to a large group of islands in the East Sea, they were also shocked by the scene before them. On the surface of the sea, dozens of islands formed a powerful formation. In the sky, there were countless mountains hanging upside down. Between the mountains, there were 5 colored lights connecting them. Cranes were flying back and forth among them. Occasionally, there would be streams of light that emitted a powerful aura. The ancestral court of Fulu School looked very shabby compared to the Xuanzong ancestral court. As the future headmaster, Li Mu looked at the Xuanzong mountain gate from afar and blushed slightly. No wonder Xian Jizi didn't come. If Li Mu was the headmaster, he would be too embarrassed to come. Looking at other sects, and then looking at his own sect, when he returned to Baiyun Mountain, he would be too ashamed to see the ancestors who had dedicated their lives to the sect. Li Mu looked at the Xuanzong ancestral court and took a deep breath. One day, he would make Fulu School the #1 Taoist sect. At that time, he would also hold a conference and invite cultivators from all over the world to turn Baiyun Mountain into a Taoist holy land. But right now, the Taoist holy land was still the Xuanzong ancestral court, Penglai Mountain. There were 10 continents and 3 islands in this world. Everyone knew the locations of the 10 continents, but the locations of the 3 islands weren't fixed. Legend had it that Fangzhong, Penglai, and Kunlun were carried by 3 giant turtles and moved on the sea. As long as one could find these 3 immortal islands, they would be able to see the secrets of immortality. Countless cultivators once went out to sea to search for these 3 immortal islands. Among them, there was no lack of 6th realm and 7th realm experts, especially those who were at the end of their lifespans and wanted to find a chance to live. However, no one had ever heard of anyone finding it. Xuanzong named their sect Mount Penglai because they considered themselves an immortal mountain to set off their status. Although it was a little self-flattering, in the entire ancestral province, only they had the strength to do so. The area near Xuanzong had a large formation set up that prohibited flying. Li Mu brought the 3 girls to the front of the sect and entered Xuanzong with the cultivators who had just arrived. Not everyone could enter this conference. The entrance fee was 10 pieces of spiritual jade. For someone like Li Mu who was supported by 2 queens, 10 pieces of spiritual jade wasn't much. However, some rogue cultivators would still need to put in some effort to gather 10 pieces of spiritual jade. As the number 1 sect of Taoism, Xuanzong's method was a little petty, but there was nothing to criticize. The cultivation of the Xuanzong disciples responsible for collecting spiritual jade at the entrance was not very high. They were only at the 2nd or 3rd realm, but their faces were filled with arrogance. They did not even look 5th realm cultivators in the eye. This was normal. In the number 1 sect of Taoism, even if they were only guarding the mountain, they were still Xuanzong disciples. In their eyes, even Xuanzong's dogs were superior to outsiders. Li Mu handed over 40 pieces of spiritual jade and entered Xuanzong with the 3 girls. Some of the cultivators who came here were alone, but most of them came in groups of 3 to 5. Most of the cultivators who came here wanted to exchange for some treasures. They did not need to worry about their own safety in Xuanzong, but that was no longer the case once they left Xuanzong. After every conference, there would be cases of people getting greedy for treasures and killing people for their belongings. After a long time, the cultivators who came here in search of fortuitous encounters learned to travel in groups. Even though the cultivators who came here came in groups, it was still very rare for a man to have 3 beauties by his side like Li Mu. This attracted the attention of many people. The male cultivators revealed looks of envy as they pointed at Li Mu's back. This person is so lucky. Apart from being a little handsome, he looks very ordinary. However, he has 3 beauties by his side. Could he be from some cultivation clan or the disciple of some large sect? The women of the cultivation world are not so superficial as to only look at the face. I think he must have an extraordinary background. Many female cultivators who walked through Xuanzong's entrance were also discussing softly. Look at his bearing. He must be the disciple of a famous sect. I don't think so. He's so handsome and fair. Maybe he's a Xiao Bai who was raised by a high-level woman, definitely not. If he was raised by a high-level woman, why would he have these 3 beauties by his side? It can't be that these 3 beauties are raising him, right? You don't understand. It's precisely because there are high-level women raising him that he can raise others. Of course, it's also possible that he has some special skills, which is why he has these 3 beauties following him. It'd be great if he was a disciple of a large sect. This person looks like a lecher. With my looks, if he takes a fancy to me, I won't have to worry about cultivation resources in the future. Forget it. With your looks, he wouldn't want you even if you gave him for free. You should just give up. Li Mu and Wanwan walked in front, and their faces darkened from the gossip behind them. This group of gossipy women actually hit the nail on the head. His Dharma treasures, spirit medicines, and spirit jades basically all came from the Empress and Phantom Princess. However, there was nothing he could do about this. Putting aside the fact that he was not the Talisman Puppet sect master yet, even if he became the Talisman Puppet sect master in the future, and the entire Talisman Puppet sect would belong to him, he would not be as wealthy as Huan Ji or the Empress. They had the Demon Nation and the Great Zhou dynasty behind them. How could they compare to the strength of a nation? Li Mu couldn't refute these women's words even if he wanted to. He could only lead the 3 women a few steps forward and arrive at a large plaza ahead of them. The plaza's floor was paved with countless spirit jades. The entire plaza was divided into crisscrossing streets. The streets were very wide and filled with small stalls. There were tables set up by the stalls, and all kinds of cultivation supplies were placed on the tables. There were pills, fulu, dharma artifacts, books, and so on. Behind the tables, there were people loudly hawking their wares. Profound level divine travel talisman, 10 spirit jades for 1. Middle level essence nurturing pill, 100 spirit jades for 1 bottle. 500 spirit jades, profound level flying sword, please take it away. Basic fulu, basic array formation encyclopedia, price can be negotiated. Standing in front of the plaza and looking at the countless inverted immortal mountains, it was like a scene in the divine capital. In Li Mu's heart, the Eastern Sea Xuanzong, the #1 sect of Taoism, didn't seem like much. Chapter 528. What appeared before Li Mu's eyes was shockingly a large-scale trading market. At a glance, there were nearly 100 street stalls set up on the crisscrossing streets. There were people coming and going in front of the stalls, shouting and bargaining. It made the Xian sect ancestral court, which was filled with an immortal aura, look like a marketplace. There was a dazzling array of things on display in the market, from fulu pills to magic treasures and cultivation methods. There were all kinds of strange things. On both sides of the street, there were rows of shops. In terms of decoration, they were much better than the street stalls. There was also a long line of customers outside. Li Mu glanced around and understood that these people who set up stalls outside were itinerant cultivators from small sections. And those who could open shops on the street were not from the 6 major sects, but from famous Taoist cultivation families. Li Mu casually looked at a few stalls, walked into 2 shops, and found some patterns. All the things in the shops were very expensive, but the quality was definitely top-notch. On the other hand, the things in the stalls on the streets were of mixed quality, but they were cheap. If one's eyesight was good enough, they might be able to find something good. In terms of service, the itinerant cultivators in the stalls were full of enthusiasm. They had smiles on their faces from beginning to end, making people feel like they were bathing in a spring breeze. The disciples of the sects and families in the shops were all expressionless and ignored people. Even so, there was still an endless stream of customers in these shops. This was also very normal. When cultivators bought cultivation items, the first thing they looked at was the quality. If the fulu didn't work, the flying sword would break when it collided with people, and the elixir would explode and die. No matter how cheap it was, no one would buy it. The 6 major sects each studied their own path, and each of them was an old shop with nearly 1,000 years of history. Buying things from the 6 major sects might be expensive, but they would never buy the wrong thing. This was related to their lives, and almost no one would care about that little bit of spiritual jade. Only some cultivators who were really embarrassed with money would patronize the roadside stalls. Shopping was a woman's nature. Even female dragons and female foxes were no exception. Xiao Bai, Wan Wan, and Xing Xian had just arrived, and their eyes were already busy. Although they followed closely behind Li Mu, their eyes kept looking around. Li Mu came out this time to make Wan Wan happy. After casually visiting 2 shops, he said to them, "You 3 can shop by yourselves. Tell me if you see anything you like. You can buy anything you want today." Wan Wan and Xiao Bai, of course, Li Mu doted on them as much as he could. Xing Xian had performed well along the way. Wan Wan was able to walk out of her depressed state because of Xing Xian, so Li Mu counted her in. It was said that every dragon had countless treasures, and their wealth was comparable to that of a country. When she escaped from her home, she only had 2 pitchforks on her, which was really a disgrace to the dragon race. Li Mu was rarely generous and let her buy some goods. "Thank you, young master." "Thank you, benefactor." Hearing this, Xiao Bai, Wan Wan's face showed excitement. She quickly stood on tiptoe and kissed Li Mu on both sides of his face. This scene made many of the surrounding male cultivators extremely envious. "Thank you, milord." Xing Xian imitated them and puckered her lips. Li Mu pressed her head and said, "Forget about you. You smell like seafood." After receiving Li Mu's promise, the 3 girls completely let go of their natural instincts. They lingered in front of various stalls and shops. Other cultivators were either looking at magic treasures or fulu pills, but they never lacked these. Their eyes were full of immortal clothes and accessories. Everyone loved beauty, especially women. But in the cultivation world, cultivators' pursuit of strength was always the first. They would not spend precious spiritual jades to buy things that were not suitable for them. In front of a small stall, the three girls stopped at the same time. The accessories and clothes here, whether it was the material or the style, could not be compared to the shops in the secular world. Although they were not useful, they were good-looking. Especially when compared to the simple stalls and shops in the surroundings, it was a beautiful scenery. A few female cultivators were also attracted by the goods on the stall. After asking about the price, they shook their heads and walked away. Although these clothes were called immortal clothes, other than the beautiful style, they had no other use. The defense was pitifully weak. Who would spend 100 spiritual jades to buy these flashy but useless things? The owner of the stall was a young man. He was short and ugly. At this moment, he was sitting on a stone bench with a frown. He had already set up a stall for half a day, but he could not sell a single piece of clothing or jewelry. He knew very well why the goods could not be sold. Although these things were beautiful, they were not practical for cultivators. Female cultivators among the loose cultivators liked them but could not afford them. Female cultivators in aristocratic families and sects did not lack spiritual jades. They would not condescend to buy clothes at a roadside stall. If they wanted to go, they would go to the shops of the big sections. Although the things there were not beautiful, they were practical. He could not compare. Unfortunately, when he went to those sects to ask for cooperation and wanted to put the immortal clothes in their shops to sell, even if he gave them 40% of the profits, he was mercilessly rejected. Seeing three more beautiful female cultivators in front of the stall, the depressed expression on the young man's face disappeared in a second. He put on a bright smile and said enthusiastically, "Dear customers, what would you like to see?" Seeing Wanwan's gaze looking at one of the immortal clothes, he immediately said, "This colorful cloud brocade dress is very suitable for you. This dress is woven from the silk of a transformed silkworm demon. You can touch it with your hand. This dress is smooth to the touch and feels light when worn. It is very comfortable. In addition, this immortal clothes also have the effect of avoiding dust. It is also a defensive magic artifact." Xiao Bai's gaze swept past a piece of clothing, and he immediately said, "Miss, this purple silk dress with jade green patterns doesn't suit you. Look at this silver patterned 100 butterflies flower dress at the side. I feel that this immortal robe suits your temperament better." Chang Xian's gaze only lingered on the pendant for a moment. The young man continued, "Miss, you have good eyesight. This 5-colored stone pendant is naturally formed. There is no trace of carving. It is the best of the best. As long as you pay 200 spirit jades, you can have it." This young man was obviously very good at promoting. With just a few words, Wanwan and the others were tempted to buy. Li Mu saw that and did not stop them. Although these bright and beautiful clothes did not have any practical use, Wanwan and the others' defensive magic artifacts were more advanced close-fitting inner armor. They bought these clothes for beauty. In the end, the three women each chose a piece of clothing and a piece of jewelry. Li Mu was about to pay when the vendor continued, "Miss, don't you want to look at something else? You just chose autumn clothes. There are spring, summer, and winter clothes here. Look at this lotus leaf feather gauze dress. It is very suitable for summer. And this cloud butterfly dress is the best choice for spring clothes. If you miss this opportunity, you will have to wait 5 years." Wanwan and Xiaobai thought about it and felt that what he said made sense. Thus, they each bought a few more pieces of clothing. The young man knew that he had met a big customer this time. The smile on his face became even brighter. He continued, "Miss, do you want to buy a few pieces for your friends? If there are more than 20 pieces, I can give you a 10% discount for each piece. If you buy 10,000 spiritual jades this time, I will give you a 20% discount next time." Wanwan turned to look at Li Mu and said, "Young master, why don't you buy a few pieces for Miss and Big Sister Qing?" Xiao Bai also said, "Also, Big Sister Zhou, Big Sister Ali, and Auntie Mei. If they know that we came out to play and did not bring them gifts, they might not be happy." Ao Qingxin also looked at Li Mu expectantly. Can I buy 10 more pieces for myself? Although Li Mu did not lack spiritual jades, his spiritual jades did not grow on trees. They were given to him by the Empress and Huan Ji. It would be a waste to buy these useless things. His heart ached for the spiritual jades. However, he had already said what he wanted. If he went back on his words now, it would affect his great image in the hearts of Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. More importantly, if Lu Hanyan and the Empress knew that Li Mu had brought Xiao Bai and the others out to play and did not bring them gifts, it would not just be a matter of them being unhappy. Li Mu could pretend that he did not care. He waved his hand and said, "Buy, buy, buy. Buy as much as you want." The three girls were very happy to choose. The peddler's eyes were shining. He held a pen in his hand and quickly calculated on a piece of paper. When Li Mu saw the final number, even if he was mentally prepared, he did not expect that they would actually choose something worth 20,000 spiritual jades. Wan Wan also saw the final number. As if she had done something wrong, she tugged on Li Mu's sleeve and whispered, "Young master, why don't we not buy so many?" Before Li Mu could say anything, a voice came from behind him. "You are not even willing to buy such little things for the beauties. You are too stingy. Today, I, Qing Xuanzi, will buy everything that these three beauties want. Just treat it as making friends." A handsome young man walked out from behind. The man was hugging two girls on his left and right, and there were another two following behind him. These four girls could not be considered as exceptional beauties, but their appearances were still outstanding. However, when compared to Wan Wan, Xiao Bai, and Qing Xian, they were somewhat dull. The sudden appearance of the young man and his identity caused a commotion in the surrounding crowd. "It's Qing Xuanzi. I heard that he is not even 30 years old, but his cultivation is already at the 5th realm. Among the young disciples of Xuanzong, his strength can be ranked in the top 10. Rumor has it that he cultivates the yin and yang dual cultivation technique. He has more than a dozen cultivation partners around him. I'm afraid he has taken a fancy to these three girls. Sigh, why didn't Master Qing Xuanzi take a fancy to me? I am also willing to be his cultivation partner." The young man beside the three girls also has an extraordinary aura. He doesn't look like an ordinary person. So what? Even if he has a small background, can he compare to the core disciples of Xuanzong? One who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. This guy who called himself Qing Xuanzi belittled Li Mu and raised himself up as soon as they met. His gaze did not leave Xiao Bai and the other two girls for even a moment. Li Mu looked at him indifferently, quietly waiting for his performance. Qing Xuanzi smiled at Xiao Bai and Wan Wan and said, "I'm Qing Xuanzi, a 4th-generation disciple of Xuanzong. I don't have any other intentions. I just want to get to know the three of you." Without waiting for Xiao Bai and the others to speak, he looked at the young stall owner and asked, "How many spiritual jades do the three beauties want? I'll pay for them." No matter who paid, the spiritual jades would be in his hands. The young man was overjoyed and immediately said, "The total is 20,800 spiritual jades. I'll round it down, so 20,000 will do." Qing Xuanzi was startled and asked uncertainly, "How much?" The young man smiled and said, 20,000 low-grade spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi's eyes widened a little. "It's just a few pieces of clothing, and it costs 20,000 spiritual jades? Is this stall owner crazy?" His face darkened, and he said angrily, "Bastard, how dare you scam Xuanzong? What do you have here that's worth 20,000 spiritual jades?" Although he had 20,000 spiritual jades, he was not so generous as to give it to a stranger he had just met. The young man pointed innocently at the nearly 100 pieces of clothing and all the accessories on the stall and said, "These three ladies have bought almost everything here." Qing Xuanzi's face turned red and white. He turned to look at Xiao Bai and Wan Wan with a smile and said, "Ladies, why are you buying so many clothes?" As soon as he finished speaking, Li Mu reached out his hand, and a pile of spiritual jades appeared in the void. He looked at the young stall owner and said, "There are 200 mid-grade spiritual jades here. Keep them well." Spiritual jades were divided into different grades. A mid-grade spiritual jade was worth 100 low-grade spiritual jades. As the currency in the cultivation world, people were used to pricing things in terms of the lowest grade spiritual jades. Li Mu flipped his hand again, and all the clothes and accessories on the stall disappeared. Flask Sky Treasure. Someone in the crowd cried out in surprise. Which cultivator didn't want to possess a Flask Sky Treasure? It could be used to store items conveniently. However, only 7th level cultivators could master the Flask Sky art. Even 7th level cultivators would have to spend a lot of effort to create a Flask Sky Dharma treasure that could be used for storage. This young man must have an extremely prominent background to be able to casually throw out 20,000 spiritual jades to buy some useless clothes and accessories with the Flask Sky treasure. At least, Qing Xuanzi could not be so generous. Under the strong contrast, the people who felt that Qing Xuanzi was quite charismatic just a moment ago now felt like a clown. On the other hand, the young man who spent a lot of money was filled with an indescribable elegance in his every move. The young stall owner wrapped the 200 mid-grade spiritual jades with a piece of black cloth in an instant. He looked at Li Mu with shining eyes and said, "Sir, I'll give you a 30% discount the next time you buy something from me." Qing Xuanzi's face turned from white to black. Li Mu was held by Wan Wan on the left and Xiao Bai on the right. When he walked past Qing Xuanzi, he whispered in a voice that everyone could hear, "Why are you pretending if you don't have money?" The crowd burst into laughter. Qing Xuanzi clenched his fists so hard that the veins on the back of his hands bulged, but he quickly relaxed them. The stall owner had already disappeared into the crowd after selling all the goods and obtaining the spiritual jades. A Xuanzong disciple walked over from afar and looked at Qing Xuanzi in confusion. He asked, "Senior brother Qing Xuanzi, what's wrong?" Qing Xuanzi looked at the disappearing figures and gritted his teeth. Investigate this person's background. Chapter 529. The Xuanzong disciple followed Qing Xuanzi's gaze and asked, "Did that person offend you, senior brother?" Qing Xuanzi said coldly, "This person dared to insult me. I can't take this lying down." The Xuanzong disciple looked at Qing Xuanzi and shook his head. "Since this person insulted you, senior brother, just return the favor. Why do you need to investigate his background? No matter how powerful he is, can he be more powerful than you, senior brother?" Before Qing Xuanzi could speak, Qing Songzi said indifferently, "Who are you, senior brother?" "You're the leader of the 4th generation disciples of Xuanzong. No matter what his background is, whether he's a disciple of the 5 sects, a disciple of an aristocratic family, or a royal family of a country, can he be more powerful than you, senior brother?" Qing Xuanzi looked at his junior brother with a glint in his eyes. Qing Songzi was right. He was one of the 10 core disciples of Xuanzong. As the head of the 6 Taoist sects, Xuanzong was above the secular imperial power. The core disciples of the other 5 sects couldn't be compared to him in terms of status. As for those aristocratic families and the secular imperial family, they couldn't be compared to Xuanzong. What did he have to be afraid of? As if he thought of something, he looked at Qing Songzi and said indifferently, "Junior brother, you seem to want me to have a conflict with this person." Qing Songzi shrugged and said helplessly, "What are you thinking, senior brother?" "I just think that you're too cautious and you're embarrassing Xuanzong. If you're worried that this person has a powerful background and you don't dare to provoke him, I'll help you find someone to investigate him. But it might take some time, so please be patient, senior brother." Qing Xuanzi waved his hand and said coldly, "No need to investigate. Why would I be afraid of a nobody?" Seeing Qing Xuanzi leave, Qing Songzi raised his hands and sneered in his heart, "Idiot who only thinks with his lower body. He's just relying on a good master. What right does he have to be one of the 10 core disciples? Let's see if you can afford to offend someone who can ride a dragon." As Li Mu led Wan Wan and the others to continue strolling around the market, the number of gazes on him increased. Some discussions and speculations about his identity also began to increase. Some people said that he was a disciple of a cultivation clan, some said that he was a prince of some royal family, and some said that he was a core disciple of one of the 5 sections. Although his seniority in the Fulu school was high, he did not show his face often. As for the other sects, other than a few elders and heads, basically no one had seen him before. Li Mu wandered around for a while with the intention of finding a few treasures. Soon, he was disappointed to find that although there were many strange things here, most of them were useless. However, he saw some materials that could be used to write heavenly secret talismans. Li Mu walked in front of a small stall selling elixirs, casually picked a few stalks and asked, "How much are these?" The stall owner calculated and said, 500 spiritual jades. "You can take all of them." Li Mu picked up a white stick that was about half an arm's length. It looked like jade and stone, but it was not stone. He placed it in the pile of elixirs and said, "Many of these elixirs are not old enough. 500 spiritual jades is too expensive. I'm too lazy to bargain with you. Including this, I'll give you 500 spiritual jades." In fact, the stall owner did not know what the white object was. It was something he accidentally dug out from the ground 2 years ago. It was abnormally hard and did not have much spiritual chi. It had been left here for a long time and no one wanted it. After thinking about it, he waved his hand and said, "I'll give it to you." He saw clearly that this person had just thrown out 20,000 spiritual jades, so his price was indeed a little high. These elixirs were worth at most 400 spiritual jades. Seeing that the other party did not bargain, he did not lose anything by giving him something worthless. Li Mu picked up the white object and put it away first. It was actually a spiritual bone. On the surface, it did not have much spiritual chi, but after it was ground into powder, it was a material for writing high-level fulu. Judging from the appearance, the owner of this bone was at least at the 6th Dongxian, if not the 7th realm transcendence. Li Mu was about to put away these elixirs when a voice suddenly came from the side. "I'll take these elixirs for 600 spiritual jades." Li Mu turned to look at Qing Xuanzi, who was expressionless. The stall owner naturally wanted to sell more spiritual jades, but he had already promised someone. If it were someone else, he might still reluctantly sell to the young man who made the first bid. However, this was Qing Xuanzi, Xuanzong's core disciple. He could not afford to offend him in Xuanzong's territory. He was in a dilemma. Li Mu saw the stall owner's dilemma and said with a smile, "In that case, let him have this elixir." The stall owner breathed a sigh of relief and quickly said, "Thank you, young master. I'll give it to you as an apology." Li Mu did not even look at Qing Xuanzi and continued to pick up treasures. One moment, he had his eyes on a flying sword, the next moment, he had his eyes on a bottle of medicinal pills, and the next moment, he had his eyes on a cultivation technique. However, every time he wanted to buy it, Qing Xuanzi would step in and buy it at a price that was 100 spirit jades higher than his. Li Mu would always give in. Wan gritted her teeth and said, "This person is too hateful. He always steals what we want." Li Mu smiled and said, "It's okay. The highest bidder gets it. This is the rule. As long as he has enough spiritual jades, he can buy everything here." Many people in the market had already seen that Qing Xuanzi and the unidentified young man were fighting. Every time, the young man would snatch the items that the young man wanted. At first, they thought that the two of them would have a conflict because of this. However, the young man seemed to be very magnanimous. After being robbed by Qing Xuanzi several times, he was not angry at all. After watching for a while, everyone saw the clues. It was not that the young man was magnanimous. He was clearly toying with Qing Xuanzi. He deliberately pretended to be interested in those items. His goal was to waste Qing Xuanzi's spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi was a core disciple of Xuanzong. Although his cultivation was high, he obviously did not know the ways of the world. He thought that he had benefited, but in fact, he had been played like a monkey. Qing Xuanzi followed behind Li Mu and gradually realized that something was wrong. Seeing the expressions of the people around him and the whispers in the distance, his face became even gloomier. When he saw Li Mu pick up another flying sword and was about to pay the stall owner with spiritual jades, he did not make a move, which was rare. Seeing that Qing Xuanzi did not make a move, Li Mu put away the spiritual jades that he had already taken out and said to the stall owner apologetically, "I'm sorry, I suddenly don't want them." When Qing Xuanzi saw this, how could he not know that he had been toyed with? His face was livid, and he wanted to draw his sword and fight this person. However, he also knew that he was not in the right now. Once he made a move, even if he won, he would be talked about. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. Seeing that Qing Xuanzi did not fall for it, Li Mu walked to a small stall. The stall owner was a middle-aged man with a cultivation at the third realm. His hair was messy, and his beard was unshaven. He looked rather sloppy. Li Mu pointed at an item on the stone table in front of him and asked, "How much is this?" The stall owner was fiddling with a pile of items on the stone table. He looked up at Li Mu, then lowered his head again and said softly, 1,000 spiritual jades. As soon as he said that, there was a burst of laughter from the surroundings. He wants to sell this lousy item for 1,000 spiritual jades? He must be crazy for spiritual jades. I've already seen him selling here for 10 years. In the 2 exchanges, he didn't sell a single item. He's really determined to come again this year. Of all the things he can do with 1,000 spiritual jades, which idiot would spend 1,000 spiritual jades on a pile of junk? The middle-aged stall owner turned a deaf ear to everyone's mockery and continued fiddling with the items in his hands. Li Mu picked up the item that he had his eyes on and continued to ask, "How do I use this?" The middle-aged man looked up at him again and said, "Fill it with spiritual jades from the back and activate it with dermic powers. Then, you can attack from the front." Li Mu looked at the item in his hands. Although it was small, it was heavy. The back was square, and the front was a hollow iron cylinder. Li Mu put it down and said, "I'll take it for 1,000 spiritual jades." The middle-aged man's hands paused. He did not expect that someone would really spend 1,000 spiritual jades to buy his item. Not far behind Li Mu, Qing Xuanzi had a vigilant look on his face. He subconsciously thought that this person was setting him up again, wanting him to spend a large amount of spiritual jades to buy such a useless item. However, if this was really a treasure, wouldn't this person be taking advantage of it for nothing? After careful consideration, he walked up and said calmly, "I'll give you 1,001 spiritual jades." He only had 1 spiritual jade more than this person. 1 spiritual jade could not do anything, but it could cause greater humiliation to this person. Li Mu did not give it to Qing Xuanzi this time. He said calmly, 2,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi said, 2,001 spiritual jades. Li Mu hesitated for a moment and said again, 3,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi did not hesitate, 3,001 spiritual jades. Li Mu looked furious. He looked at Qing Xuanzi and said angrily, "What are you trying to do?" The angrier Li Mu was, the happier Qing Xuanzi felt. He glanced at Li Mu and said calmly, "It just so happens that I have my eyes on this item as well. The highest bidder gets it. Even if it's 1 spiritual jade higher, it's still high." A useless piece of trash was actually bid 3,000 spiritual jades by 2 people. The onlookers were dumbfounded. Was this the world of rich people? Li Mu looked extremely pained. He squeezed out a few words from between his teeth, 4,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi also hesitated for a moment this time, but when he saw Li Mu's expression, he said decisively, 4,001 spiritual jades. The pained and conflicted expression on Li Mu's face melted like spring rain after Qing Xuanzi shouted that number. He smiled at Qing Xuanzi and said, "Congratulations, the treasure is yours." Chapter 530. In the market, when Qing Xuanzi bought the treasure with 4,000 spiritual jades, the crowd was stunned for a moment, and then there was a lot of laughter. It was not common to see a core disciple of Xuanzong being played like this so many times. Qing Xuanzi stood there in a daze, and his face turned from green to black. He was played again. This damn guy made him spend 4,000 spiritual jades to buy a piece of trash. Hearing the laughter around him, Qing Xuanzi's face sank. He took out 40 mid-grade spiritual jades and 1 low-grade spiritual jade and placed them on the stone table in front of the stall owner. Although he was distressed and angry, he had to pay the spiritual jades. Otherwise, he would lose Xuanzong's face. At this moment, his hatred for the person in front of him was monstrous. He took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. He looked at the stall owner and asked, how do I use this? The stall owner put away the spiritual jades and pointed at a groove behind the item. He said, inlay a spiritual jade here and activate it with spiritual power. It will launch an attack from here. Qing Xuanzi did as he was told and inlaid a low-grade spiritual jade into the groove behind the item. He aimed the metal cylinder at the front at the empty space in the distance and activated it with spiritual power. The spiritual jade disappeared instantly, but there was no attack from the metal cylinder. Instead, the item in his hand exploded. Although Qing Xuanzi put up a shield in time and was not injured, he still looked very embarrassed. The middle-aged stall owner looked at the mess on the ground and shook his head. Failed again. At this moment, Qing Xuanzi's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. He spent 4,000 spiritual jades to buy the item, and with just one explosion, not only did he lose the spiritual jades, but he also lost face in front of so many people. Most importantly, in order to maintain his composure, he could only suppress all his anger and stay here. Because if he left, he did not know what the people here would say about him behind his back. He pretended as if nothing happened and continued to walk around the nearby stalls, but he was a little further away from Li Mu. After many exchanges, he did not gain the upper hand, so he chose to temporarily retreat. Li Mu was still standing in front of the middle-aged man's stall. The middle-aged man looked at him and said, "What else do you want?" "I'll make it clear first, once the items here are sold, they are not refundable. Think carefully before you buy." Li Mu looked at the pile of things on the table and said, "I don't want these things." The middle-aged man looked up and asked, "Then what are you still doing here?" Li Mu looked at him and said, "I want you." The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment. He shrank back and asked, "What do you mean?" Li Mu picked up an item that was very similar to the one Qing Xuanzi had just bought and asked the middle-aged man, "This item wasn't originally this big, right?" The middle-aged man's dispirited eyes suddenly lit up. "You know these things too?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't understand. I'm just slightly interested, but I'm looking forward to seeing what they look like after they grow up. I'm even more looking forward to seeing more types of them. They can run on the ground, fly in the sky, swim in the water." The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "That would require a lot of spiritual jades, a lot of manpower, and a lot of materials." Li Mu smiled and said, "I lack everything, but I don't lack people, spirit jades, or materials." The middle-aged man breathed quickly and said, "If you can provide me with these things, I'll give you my life." Li Mu shook his head and said, "I don't want your life. If you need these things, come to the Department of Worship in the divine capital of Great Zhou and find me. My name is Li Mu." The middle-aged man was silent for a moment. He looked up and said, "You can call me Mo Li." Li Mu raised his eyebrows. "The successor of the Mahist?" The middle-aged man lowered his head and said with a complicated tone, "I didn't expect that there would still be people who remember the Mahist." Not long after, Li Mu walked in the market. Wan held Li Mu's arm and asked in confusion, "Young master, what did you mean by what you said to that person?" Li Mu smiled and didn't explain too much. He only said, "He is a very capable person. I invited him to work for the imperial court." After walking around the various streets and seeing that they were not as curious as before, Li Mu planned to take them to the Fulu School's shop here. He had just taken 2 steps when his right wrist was suddenly gripped tightly. He looked to his right and found that Qing Xian was holding his hand tightly. Her eyes were fixed on a stall. That stall sold all kinds of cultivation books. There were Fulu basics, alchemy basics, and array basics. Qing Xian's gaze was fixed on one of the books. It was a thin book, but there were only a few crooked glyphs on the book. Li Mu didn't recognize a single word. He knew the Great Zhou language, the Shen language, and the Yao language, but he had never seen the one in front of him. Qing Xian didn't say anything, but she had already conveyed her intentions to Li Mu. Li Mu walked toward the stall, but a figure beat him to it. Qing Xuanzi walked to the stall and picked up the thin book. He asked the stall owner, "How much is this book?" The stall owner bought this strange book from the secular world with a few taels of silver. He didn't recognize the words on it. Seeing that the other party was a disciple of Xuanzong, he wanted to curry favor with him. He smiled and said, if you want it, 100 spiritual jades will do. Qing Xuanzi didn't recognize the words either. He just felt that the book was strange and wanted to buy it to ask his master. He had just taken out the spiritual jades when a voice came from behind him. I'll pay 1,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi looked back and saw Li Mu. Anger appeared on his face. He gritted his teeth and said, I'll pay 2,000. Li Mu's expression didn't change. 3,000, Qing Xuanzi gritted his teeth. 4,000, Li Mu continued to raise the price. 5,000, Qing Xuanzi threw the book into Li Mu's arms and sneered. This is yours. Earlier, this person asked him to pay 4,000 spiritual jades for a piece of trash. Now, he asked this person to pay 5,000 spiritual jades for something that was worth 100 spiritual jades. He was very happy, and even half of his anger disappeared. However, when he saw Li Mu pay the spiritual jades directly, he felt that something was wrong. He wasn't as excited as before. The stall owner didn't care about that. He liked these two guests too much. He got 5,000 spiritual jades for free. This trip to Xuanzong was complete. He was worried that the other party would go back on his word, so he immediately packed up and left as fast as he could. The people around shook their heads. Although this mysterious young man was smart, he still fell for Qing Xuanzi's trick this time and lost 5,000 spiritual jades for nothing. They had never seen 5,000 spiritual jades in their lives. Li Mu walked to Qing Xian and asked her with uncertainty, Are you sure this book is worth 5,000 spiritual jades? Can you understand it? Qing Xian whispered, Of course, this is the secret text of the dragon race. Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then asked, What's written on it? Qing Xian didn't translate for him. Instead, she bit the tip of her finger and dripped a drop of blood on it. After her blood dripped on the page, it disappeared. At the same time, the thin book in Li Mu's hands suddenly emitted a strange aura. Li Mu was too familiar with this aura. This was the aura of the heavenly book. Almost instantly, he put the book into the pot. However, the moment the aura spread out, many people around still felt it. What's that? That aura is too mysterious. Treasure, it's actually a treasure. The cultivators in the market were shocked. They thought that the young man was tricked by Qing Xuanzi. No one would have thought that it was actually a treasure. The aura just now was so mysterious. This book must be a great treasure, and its value far exceeded 5,000 spiritual jades. Qing Xuanzi was completely dumbfounded. He was completely stunned on the spot. At this moment, he could no longer suppress the anger in his heart and vented it all out. With a thought, a flying sword floated above his head. The flying sword shone brightly and attacked Li Mu. Qing Xuanzi followed closely behind and roared, Thief, give me back my treasure. Facing Qing Xuanzi's aggressive flying sword, Li Mu didn't do anything, but Qing Xian beside him couldn't stand still. She took a step forward, and a giant dragon shadow rushed out of her body. The shadow let out a dragon's roar and collided with the flying sword. The flying sword was sent flying back, and the sword light immediately dimmed. Qing Xuanzi spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were wide open as he looked at Qing Xian and said in horror, Dragon race. The market was instantly in an uproar. Dragon race. That girl is actually a dragon. Oh my god, I actually saw a true dragon in my lifetime. I know, she's the giant dragon we saw at sea. That dragon is exactly the same as this shadow. Then this young master is the powerhouse riding the dragon. Who is he? He's so rich that he even has a dragon mount. After Qing Xuanzi and Qing Xian released their auras without restraint, a few figures suddenly flew out from the immortal mountain hanging upside down in the sky. Their voices were heard before they arrived. Who is so bold to be so presumptuous in my Xuanzong? An old man flew down from above. Someone in the market blurted out, It's Elder Hua Yangzi. His cultivation is only one step away from Dongxian, far surpassing Qing Xuanzi. This person is in trouble. Amidst the discussion, the old man floated over. However, when he flew to the market and saw Li Mu, his originally tense face immediately became respectful. He cupped his fists and said, "Hua Yangzi greets Uncle Master Li." Seeing Elder Hua Yangzi of Xuanzong respectfully saluting this young man, the crowd was stunned. Uncle Master? This mysterious powerhouse with a true dragon mount was Elder Hua Yangzi's Uncle Master. Wasn't that the same seniority as the sect master of Xuanzong? Qing Xuanzi was even more shocked and frightened. Hua Yangzi was his Uncle Master. Didn't that mean he had to call Hua Yangzi his Uncle Master? Li Mu didn't know many of the elders of Xuanzong. Other than immortal Miao Dun, there were only the 5 people who had been to Emperor Bai's cave residence. The old man in front of him was one of the 5. Li Mu glanced at him with one hand behind his back. He looked at Qing Xuanzi and said lightly, "Xuanzong has taught a good disciple." Chapter 531. Hua Yangzi knew very well that although Li Mu was young, he was a second-generation disciple of Fulu School and was above them in terms of seniority. However, Qing Xuanzi was also a core disciple that Xuanzong focused on. He hesitated for a moment and said to Qing Xuanzi, "If you have offended Martial Uncle Li in any way, apologize to him quickly. I believe that Martial Uncle Li is a magnanimous person and won't make a fuss about it." Li Mu glanced at Qing Xuanzi. This old man was smooth and cunning in dealing with things. He covered up everything with one sentence. If he didn't let this matter go, it would seem that he was narrow-minded. However, Qing Xuanzi obviously didn't give Hua Yangzi any face. He didn't even look at him. He quietly put away his flying sword and flew straight to the celestial mountain above. Hua Yangzi looked embarrassed and said to Li Mu, "I'm sorry, Martial Uncle Li. These young disciples offended you. I apologize to you." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "This has nothing to do with you. You don't have to apologize." Judging from Qing Xuanzi's attitude towards Hua Yangzi, Xuanzong and Fulu School undoubtedly had a completely different sect culture. Fulu School attached great importance to seniority. Therefore, even if Xian Jizi and Yuzenzi's cultivation had reached the transcendent realm, they still had to respectfully call Fu Daozi Martial Uncle when they saw him. Similarly, no matter how talented and strong the 4th-generation disciples were, they wouldn't be too presumptuous in front of the seniors of the sect whose cultivation was lower than theirs. Xuanzong obviously valued strength more. Although Qing Xuanzi's cultivation wasn't as good as Hua Yangzi's, he was also in the 5th realm. Moreover, he was extremely young and had unlimited potential in the future. When facing the seniors of the sect, he also had arrogance in his bones. It couldn't be said which sect culture was better. Fulu School respected the teachers more. However, Xuanzong respected strength and the disciples had a stronger motivation to cultivate. Perhaps this was one of the reasons why Xuanzong had so many powerhouses. After apologizing to Li Mu, Hua Yangzi quickly left. In the marketplace, many gazes were focused on Li Mu, and the sounds of discussion were endless. Even Elder Hua Yangzi calls him Martial Uncle. He must be one of the 2nd-generation disciples of the 5 sections. No wonder he's so wealthy and has a dragon as his mount. Qing Xuanzi really can't compare to such a status. At first, I thought that Qing Xuanzi was a refined disciple of a large sect. Now, it seems that this person is narrow-minded and irritable. What kind of treasure did that senior obtain just now? The discussions reached Li Mu's ears. Obviously, he couldn't stay there any longer. Li Mu prepared to go to the Fulu School's shop, but before he went, he stopped in front of a small stall. This stall was where Qing Xuanzi had snatched the spirit herbs and Li Mu had obtained the spirit bone. He reached out and threw a jade bottle to the stall owner, saying, "Refine it well. It's enough for you to break through to the transcendent realm." The stall owner was stunned for a moment. He opened the bottle and immediately smelled a refreshing pill fragrance. With just a whiff, his stagnant cultivation seemed to have loosened. He immediately put away the jade bottle and excitedly bowed to Li Mu. "Thank you, senior." Li Mu waved his hand and left with Wan, Xiao Bai, and the other 2. The stall owner held the jade bottle tightly in his hand, his eyes full of gratitude. It was easy to find the Fulu School's shop here. The shops of the other small sects and clans only had one floor at most, but the 5 sects each occupied a large 3-story building. As for the Xuanzong school, their shop was at the center of the place. It was the most prosperous location, and it was 5 stories high. In front of the Fulu Pavilion, cultivators lined up in an orderly manner. Fulu School's products had always been in short supply in the cultivation world. Li Mu walked in with the 3 girls. A cultivator frowned and said, "Why are they cutting the line?" A Fulu School disciple looked up and immediately came forward, saying respectfully, "Greetings, Uncle Master." Inside the shop, several Fulu School disciples also quickly came forward and greeted respectfully. "Greetings, Uncle Master." "Greetings, Uncle Master." Seeing this, the people lining up outside the shop immediately stopped talking. However, they couldn't help but be curious. This young man actually had such a high seniority in the Fulu School. Li Mu waved his hand to the disciples and said, "Go about your business. I'm just here to take a look." An elder led Li Mu and the others to the 3rd floor. After offering them some fragrant tea, he respectfully retreated. Li Mu let Wan Wan and Xiao Bai rest here. He grabbed Qing Xian's hand, and with a thought, the 2 of them appeared in the Demon Emperor's cave. A thin book with strange runes written on it floated in front of him. There was a page in the book. It was different from the other pages. It exuded a strange aura. It was of the same origin as all the pages of the heavenly tomes that Li Mu had seen before. He reached out his hand, and the page automatically flew out and floated in his palm. Qing Xian picked up the book and flipped through it. She said in shock, "This really is the Dragon King's relic." The Dragon Clan's language was widely acknowledged to be difficult to learn. They often used a single character to contain a huge amount of information. Sometimes, they used many characters to express a simple meaning. Li Mu didn't understand the Dragon Clan's language. He asked Qing Xian, "Who is the Dragon King?" Qing Xian said, 8,000 years ago, he was a supreme master of the Dragon Clan. He once united the Dragon Clan of the 4 seas. He was the recognized king of the Dragon Clan, 8,000 years ago, a master of the Dragon Clan. Without a doubt, the Dragon King that Qing Xian mentioned was one of the supreme masters that stood at the peak of the continent. Li Mu became curious about the relic he left behind. He asked Qing Xian, "What's written on it?" Qing Xian looked at the content on the page, and her face gradually turned red. Li Mu was speechless. "Why are you blushing? Hurry up and read it." "What does this line mean?" Qing Xian lowered her head and whispered, "The taste of the Snake Clan's women is not bad. Their long legs are too clingy." She also said that she would call her sister over tomorrow. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," Li Mu cursed in his mind. This can't be that dragon's diary, right? He didn't hear the secret information he wanted to hear. Li Mu continued to point to the next page. "What does this line mean?" Qing Xian's face turned even redder. "The Fox Clan is really amazing in bed. It's a pity that her brother is a 9-tailed celestial fox. It's not worth it to fight with him. I won't look for her in the future." The book said that dragons were lustful by nature. Sure enough, this old perverted dragon actually wrote a book about love. But whether he should say it or not, the Snake Clan's legs were really clingy, and the Fox Clan was really amazing in bed. Li Mu coughed lightly and pulled his thoughts back to reality. What's next? Qing Xian continued to read with a red face. I tricked a Xian ghost these past few days. She said that her physical body had already developed intelligence. I don't know if the 2 of them together. Stop. You don't have to read anymore. No matter how thick-skinned Li Mu was, he couldn't force a pure little female dragon to read such indecent things to him. That was too sinful. He looked at Qing Xian and directly asked, apart from these things, is there anything else that's useful? Qing Xian continued to flip through the pages. Only when she flipped to the last page did she say, Lord Dragon King said that he discovered a great secret hidden in the Dragon Clan's heavenly book. Li Mu continued to ask, and then? Qing Xian shook her head. And then there's nothing else. This broken chapter dragon made Li Mu's heart itch. However, he didn't say anything. Li Mu could see for himself. The page in his hand should be the Dragon Clan's heavenly book. However, for some reason, the Dragon King didn't pass it down. Instead, he hid it in this dating diary. Li Mu scanned this heavenly book with his spiritual sense. However, this time, he didn't enter that strange world like he usually did. A strong rebound force came from the page. Li Mu grunted and took a few steps back. He swallowed a mouthful of blood that came back up. He was slightly injured just by trying to comprehend this page. This page of the heavenly book was obviously sealed by someone. As one of the most ancient races, the Dragon Clan had many strange and unpredictable supernatural powers. Li Mu thought for a while and handed the page to Qing Xian. Try to touch this page with your spiritual sense. Qing Xian closed her eyes and opened them quickly. She shook her head and said, "My spiritual sense can't enter." It was the same heavenly book. Li Mu was hit by a rebound force when he tried to comprehend it. Although Qing Xian didn't comprehend anything, she wasn't injured either. Perhaps it had something to do with her identity as a dragon. However, why couldn't she comprehend this page even with her identity as a dragon? Why did the Dragon Clan from 8,000 years ago cut off the Dragon Clan's inheritance? Li Mu couldn't speculate about this point. He could only put away this heavenly book first. No matter what, he had made a big profit this time. The heavenly book was a priceless treasure. Not to mention 5,000 spiritual jades, even 5 million spiritual jades or 50 million spiritual jades couldn't buy it. It was just that Qing Xian acted too hastily just now. She might have attracted the attention of some people with ulterior motives. Li Mu looked at her and reminded her, "Next time you encounter such things, you must keep a low profile and make a fortune secretly. The fewer people who notice, the better." Qing Xian nodded and said, "I know." Li Mu took the book from her hand and said casually, "Oh right, teach me the dragon language when you have time." Qing Xian looked at the book in his hand and gave him a meaningful look. Li Mu immediately explained, "Don't think too much. I'm not interested in the romantic history of your Dragon King. I just want to learn something new. We humans have an old saying, there's no end to learning. Once I learn the dragon language, I'll be able to discover this kind of treasure the next time I encounter it." Chapter 532. After leaving the Fey Emperor's cave, Li Mu took stock of his gains. Although he had lost a lot of spirit jades, his gains were also huge. Not to mention the heavenly book, even if Li Mu couldn't comprehend it, it would still be a priceless treasure. As for the Mahist's successor, it was an even bigger surprise. Even when the 100 schools of thought were flourishing, the Mahist was not unknown. Although the cultivation of the Mahist members was not high, their mechanical techniques were too powerful. Even the top forces of that time had to avoid them. Unfortunately, mechanical techniques required large amounts of precious materials and spirit jades. Not to mention small forces, even ordinary countries could not afford them. Over time, the Mahist disappeared in the long river of history. Great Zhou was strong, and with the Mahist, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Li Mu was looking forward to what surprises this person would bring him. In addition, the clothes and accessories that he spent a large amount of spiritual jades on might not be worth it to others, but Li Mu bought them purely because he wanted the women around him to look good in them. He also felt that they were pleasing to the eye, so the spiritual jades he spent were not in vain. Of course, although it was not in vain, he still felt heartache. The spirit jades he had, other than his own meager salary, the Empress's reward, and the Phantom Princess's forced gift to him, were all used up. He couldn't just ask them for more. Li Mu also had a man's dignity. If they took the initiative to give it to him, then so be it. If they didn't give it to him, then Li Mu wouldn't take the initiative to ask for it. As a man, earning his own money gave him a sense of security. Leaving the 3 girls to rest on the 3rd floor, Li Mu walked down the stairs alone. Fulu Pavilion had a total of 3 floors. The 3rd floor was not open to the public. The 1st floor was for goods, and the 2nd floor was used to entertain important customers. Although there were many Fulu on the 1st floor, it couldn't satisfy everyone's needs. Some customers would ask for custom-made fulu for special purposes. Of course, the price would be more expensive. When Li Mu walked to the second floor, a fulu school elder was receiving a middle-aged man in luxurious clothes. The middle-aged man was wearing a long robe that concealed his aura. The robe was filled with spiritual qi, and it was obvious that it was not an ordinary item. Judging from the style, it should be a product of the North sect. In the world of cultivators, those who were able to afford the ritual implements of the Northern clan were generally people with a certain amount of wealth. The middle-aged man gazed at the elder of the Talisman Amulet sect and said, "To tell you the truth, fellow Taoist Qing Jingzi, I came here this time for the sake of requesting a creation talisman for my son. I only have this one son, and I hope that this talisman can protect him. Creation talisman, Heaven rank Fulu." This talisman did not possess any offensive capabilities, but it could regenerate severed limbs and regenerate severed heads. Even if one's heart was crushed, it would regenerate in an extremely short period of time. Having a creation talisman was equivalent to having an extra life. Currently, in the world of cultivators, only the Fulu school was known to be able to draw a creation talisman. Qing Jingzi revealed a difficult expression. He looked at the middle-aged man and said, "Fellow Taoist Shen, you also know that the creation talisman is a heaven-rank Fulu. Even in my Fulu school, only the headmaster and a few heads can draw a heaven-rank Fulu. Moreover, the failure rate of a heaven-rank Fulu is extremely high. Even the headmaster cannot guarantee that he will succeed." The middle-aged man said, "I am very clear about this point, or else I would not have come here. I have inquired about the rules of your school. We will prepare 10 portions of talisman liquid for the creation talisman, and we will also give you 100,000 spiritual jades as a reward." Qing Jingzi nodded and said, "There is something I have to say in advance. If the creation of the talisman fails, all the talisman liquid will be wasted. Out of the 100,000 spiritual jades, we can only return you 50,000. Although the middle-aged man felt the pinch, he also knew that in the world, only the Fulu school could draw a heaven-rank Fulu. Hearing this, he nodded and said, "I understand the rules of your school. I have already prepared the talisman liquid and spiritual jades." Qing Jingzi was about to put away the spiritual jades when he heard a voice. "Qing Jingzi, come here." Qing Jingzi looked back and immediately stood up. He jogged to Li Mu and said respectfully, "Uncle Master, what are your orders?" Li Mu brought him to the third floor and asked bluntly, "Is this how you treat your customers?" Qing Jingzi was confused. "Uncle Master, what's wrong?" Li Mu said, "For a creation talisman, you want 10 portions of talisman liquid and 100,000 spiritual jades, and there is no guarantee of success. Do you think the reputation of the Fulu school is not collapsing fast enough?" Although Li Mu was not a businessman, he knew that this was not how business was done. Taking 10 times the materials and a high deposit, and there was no guarantee of success. Even the blackest workshop was not so black-hearted. If the talisman failed this time, who would come to the Fulu school to draw talismans next time? Wasn't this chasing the customers away? This person was so generous. If he could spend 100,000 spiritual jades this time, he might spend 200,000 spiritual jades next time. This kind of high-quality customer naturally had to be kept. Xian Jizi, the headmaster, was already useless enough. His own grand elder's lifespan was nearing its end, and the entire school could not even gather the materials for a single heavenly secret talisman. Li Mu even had to ask for help from the Empress and Huan Ji. If the ancestral court of Fulu school was rich enough, why would Li Mu put down his dignity to live off a woman? Qing Jingzi did not feel anything at all. He muttered, "But the rules of the school have always been like this." Li Mu did not say much to Qing Jingzi. He directly took out a sound transmission artifact and contacted Xian Jizi. Very quickly, Xian Jizi's voice sounded from the artifact. "Junior brother, have you arrived at Xuanzong?" Li Mu went straight to the point. "I'm currently at Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong. I have something to ask senior brother." Li Mu told Xian Jizi the situation. On the other side of the artifact, Xian Jizi said helplessly, "Junior brother, you've misunderstood. It's not that we're deliberately making things difficult for customers. It's just that writing a heavenly secret Fulu is often 1 in 10. We can't guarantee success. Of course, if junior brother personally does it, it's fine even if you only take one set of materials from them. Limu thought for a moment and asked, if I draw it, who will the spiritual jades go to? Xian Jizi said, according to the rules, 20% will be handed over to the sect. As for the rest, junior brother, you can handle it yourself. Limu decisively put away the sound transmission artifact and said to Qing Jingzi, from now on, if anyone wants to draw a high-level Fulu, tell them to come directly to me. After saying that, he looked at the middle-aged man on the second floor and asked, who's that person? He's so generous, Qing Jingzi said, he comes from a cultivation family in Jing country. His family has a spiritual jade mine. No wonder he was so generous. So his family had a mine. Limu looked at the middle-aged man as if he was looking at a pile of spiritual jades. He walked to the middle-aged man's side. Qing Jingzi took the initiative to introduce him. Fellow Daoist Shen, allow me to introduce you. This is Martial Uncle Ling Jizi. The middle-aged man immediately stood up and cupped his hands. Greetings, Senior Ling Jizi. Although the person in front of him looked young, in the cultivation world, one could never estimate one's age based on appearance. Perhaps this person was already an old monster of unknown age. Limu smiled kindly and said, fellow Daoist Shen, there's no need to be so formal. Sit. After the middle-aged man sat down, Limu asked directly, fellow Daoist, do you want a creation talisman? The middle-aged man said, yes. I'll leave this matter to your school. Limu waved his hand and said, there's no rush. Let's talk about the price first. The middle-aged man was stunned for a moment and muttered, didn't we already talk about the price? He complained in his heart. The price he agreed to just now was already the limit he could accept. If the Fulu school increased the price, he would have to seriously consider whether to buy it or not. Limu smiled and said, it's like this. Although the success rate of creating a creation talisman is not high, the grand elders of my school have returned to the sect recently. If they personally do it, they won't need 10 sets of materials. 5 sets will be enough. In addition, the Fulu school has been entrusted by you to create the talisman. If the talisman fails, it will be the responsibility of the Fulu school. The 100,000 spiritual jades will be returned to you. The middle-aged man sat in his chair, wondering if he had heard wrong. Why did the Fulu school's price get lower and lower? Not only were the materials reduced by half, but if the talisman failed, the 100,000 spiritual jades would be returned. How could there be such a good deal? Limu looked at him and explained, our Fulu school is a famous sect. We won't take advantage of you. Since the success rate of creating talismans has increased, we naturally won't charge you so much talisman liquid and spiritual jades. The middle-aged man came back to his senses and immediately said, okay. We'll do as senior says. Limu thought for a moment and said, I don't know if this fellow Daoist has any friends who need a creation talisman. After successfully creating the first Fulu, the success rate of creating the second one will increase. Therefore, we can buy the second Fulu at half price. In other words, for 150,000 spiritual jades, you can buy 2 creation talismans. Although the middle-aged man didn't need it himself, if someone could buy another one, he would save 25,000 spiritual jades. Thinking of this, he no longer hesitated and took out his sound transmission immortal tool. He immediately said, Old Ma, where are you? I have a good thing here. Quickly come to the Fulu Pavilion. In the Fulu Pavilion, 2 aristocratic family heads who had traveled thousands of miles from Jing country to Xuanzong happily gathered 10 portions of spirit liquid and 150,000 spiritual jades. They planned to buy a creation talisman each and give it to their family's younger generation to protect themselves. The Fulu school was indeed a Fulu school. They had visited all the shops here and only the Fulu school could accept the business of the heaven-grade Fulu. Limu personally sent the 2 big clients out and said with a smile, fellow Taoists, take care. In the future, let's work together more often. Our sect accepts all kinds of Fulu, and will give you preferential treatment. The price is negotiable. At the staircase on the second floor, Qing Jingzi revealed a smile and muttered, 150,000 spiritual jades. If we give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades, we'll make a net profit of 105,000. Li Mu sensed that something was wrong and asked with a frown, why do we have to give Xuanzong 45,000 spiritual jades? Qing Jingzi said, Martial uncle, don't you know? All the transactions that our 5 sects conduct here have to be given 30% to Xuanzong. This is also because the 6 sects are from the same sect, so Xuanzong gives us preferential treatment. The other small sects, aristocratic families' shops, and stalls outside have to give Xuanzong 40% or even 50%. Li Mu was stunned for a moment before he strode out of the shop and said to the 2 figures who were about to disappear, fellow Taoists, please wait. Chapter 533. In Fulu Pavilion, the 2 family heads returned to the shop and looked nervously at the spiritual jades returned by Li Mu. They asked, Senior, this is, if you think the price is too low, we can discuss it again. Li Mu returned the spiritual jades to them and said, this is a new rule of our Fulu school. For valuable Fulu items of the heaven realm and above, after the writing is done, you must hand over the spiritual jades and talismans. This way, in a month, you can come to Great Zhou Shindu to pick up the talismans. Hearing this, the 2 felt relieved and accepted the spiritual jades. They smiled and said, that's good. We originally planned to go to Great Zhou Shindu to take a look, so it's on the way. As they walked out of Fulu Pavilion, the 2 sighed in their hearts. Although they were both leaders of Dao, Xuanzong and Fulu school's attitude towards small and medium-sized sects and families was completely different. Xuanzong was high and mighty. Their shop was opened here, and every time they sold a product, they had to give 40% of the income to Xuanzong. Compared to Xuanzong, Fulu school treated them especially well, living up to its name as the leader of Dao. After sending the 2 off again, Li Mu finally understood how Xuanzong's magnificent mountain gate and the spiritual jade plaza outside were built. Including the other 5 sects of Dao, the large and small sects of Zhu province, the cultivation families, and countless rogue cultivators were all contributing to Xuanzong's construction. While most of the countries in Zhu province were still in a feudal society, Xuanzong had already taken a step into capitalism. He was the one who wasted his breath, and the one who was tired of writing talismans. In the end, he was actually working for Xuanzong. Li Mu felt a nameless anger rise in his heart. He angrily asked, does our Fulu school not have a mountain gate of our own? Why do we have to do business in someone else's place? Qing Jingzi said, this is sect master's idea. He said that White Cloud Mountain is a sacred land of the Dao sect and shouldn't do such unscrupulous things. Li Mu waved his sleeves and snapped, don't mention him to me. Xian Jizi, that prodigal son of a bitch. How many spiritual jades has he earned for others over the years, yet he can't even gather the materials for the heavenly secret talisman. How does he still have the face to be the sect leader? Qing Jingzi silently lowered his head. He couldn't interrupt when his uncle master was scolding the sect master, and he didn't dare to interrupt. Li Mu scolded Xian Jizi and calmed down very quickly. It was understandable that Xuanzong would provide the platform and take a cut from the transaction. However, they were too black-hearted. 50,000 spirit jades were gone for no reason. Li Mu's heart was bleeding. He was both angry and distressed. When he walked to the first floor and saw the situation inside, he was even angrier. Although there were many customers lining up outside, there weren't many Fulu school disciples in charge of serving customers. There weren't enough people in the shop to begin with. The few disciples who were acting as temporary clerks were still gathered together and chatting happily. They ignored the customers and ignored them. A few customers came in and walked around. When they realized that there was no one to serve them, they turned around and went to other shops. Other than Fulu school, there were also people who were good at Fulu from various sects, as well as some mid-level cultivation clans. The mid-level and low-level Fulu they produced were also of good quality. People who wanted to buy Fulu might not only choose Fulu school. Most of these disciples usually cultivated in their sections. How would they know the ways of commercial service? It was unknown how many customers went to other shops because of their arrogant and rude attitude. Li Mu inadvertently glanced around and saw a familiar figure in the shop on the first floor. It was the stall owner who Li Mu had bought a large amount of clothes and accessories from. He was currently bargaining with a disciple in the shop. He looked at a Fu Lu and pestered the disciple, saying, "Give me a discount. 1,000 spirit jades is really too expensive. How about I buy 2 pieces and you give me a 20% discount?" The Fu Lu school disciple was unmoved. He said indifferently, "The Fu Lu's price is set by the elders. We don't accept any bargaining. If you want to buy, then buy. If you don't want to buy, then go elsewhere. There are plenty of Fu Lu on the street." The young man looked at the Fu Lu floating on the counter and hesitated for a long time. In the end, he decided to give up. Just as he was about to walk out of the shop, a voice came from behind him. "Wait." The young man turned around and saw the young man who had thrown out 20,000 spirit jades standing behind him. After being stunned for a moment, his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Don't tell me you're going back on your word. Once a product is sold, it can't be returned unless there is a problem with the quality." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, I'm not here to ask for a refund. Come with me." With that, he turned around and went up to the second floor. The young man hesitated for a moment, but could only follow. When they reached the second floor, Li Mu sat down and said to the young man, "Sit." The young man immediately shook his head and said, "Senior, if you have something to say, I'll just stand and listen." Li Mu looked at him and asked, "What's your name?" The young man honestly replied, "I'm Ma Feng." Ma as in handsome horse, Feng as in wind. Although this person's cultivation wasn't high, he had a good business mind. Especially his mouth, it was simply like a lotus flower. If the disciples of the Fu Lu school were half as good as him, the Fu Lu in the shop would have been sold out long ago. Li Mu poured himself a cup of tea and said indifferently, "Ma Feng, that's a good name. Who is your master, and which sect are you from?" Ma Feng still didn't know why this expert from the Fu Lu school was looking for him. He didn't dare to hide anything and continued, "Senior, I don't have a master, nor do I belong to any sect. The reason I embarked on the path of cultivation was because I found an introductory book on chi cultivation at an old bookstall when I was young. I pondered on it blindly and unintentionally walked on this path." Li Mu looked at him and suddenly asked, "Are you willing to enter my Fu Lu school?" Ma Feng was stunned. As a rogue cultivator, he had no sect, no background, and no one to guide him in cultivation. His biggest dream was to enter a sect, but his aptitude wasn't good. Even small sects weren't willing to accept him. Entering one of the 6 Taoist sects was something he didn't even dare to dream of. After coming back to his senses, he immediately knelt down and said loudly, "This disciple is willing." Li Mu nodded and said, "Very good. From now on, you are a disciple of the 4th generation of the Fu Lu school." Ma Feng immediately took off a bag from his back and placed it in front of Li Mu. He said, "These are the spiritual jades that Martial Granduncle used to buy the immortal clothes and accessories. This disciple will return them to you." He had seen what happened in the market and guessed Li Mu's identity. He immediately changed the way he addressed him. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "These belong to you. Keep them for yourself." Ma Feng put the bag back on his back and said respectfully, "Thank you, Martial Granduncle." Li Mu said, "Get up and talk. I have some things to ask you." Ma Feng stood up from the ground and said, "Please ask, Martial Granduncle. This disciple will tell you everything he knows." Li Mu said, "If you were to manage the Fu Lu pavilion, what would you do?" Ma Feng was stunned again. "Let me manage the Fu Lu pavilion?" Li Mu nodded and said, "You can speak your mind boldly." Ma Feng had a thoughtful look on his face. He was not talented, short, and ugly. Even those small sects didn't accept him. There must be a reason why this senior was willing to let him join one of the 6 Taoist sections. This was his chance. If he grasped it, his future cultivation path would be smooth. If he didn't, he might just be an insignificant rogue cultivator for the rest of his life. He took a deep breath and said, "Martial Granduncle, this disciple thinks that there is a big problem with the Fu Lu pavilion now." Li Mu gestured to him with his hand and said, "Sit down and talk slowly." Ma Feng sat down and said boldly, "First, in the Fulu Pavilion, the attitude of the senior brothers towards the customers is too bad. We are not the only shop that sells Fulu here. Since we are the sellers, we have to prioritize the customers. Many customers are not treated in time after entering the shop, so they will go to other shops. In the middle and low-grade Fulu, the quality of our Fulu is not better than the other shops, but the price is too high and there is not much competition. This has caused a large loss of customers." Ma Feng observed Li Mu's expression as he spoke. Seeing that he was not angry because of these words, he continued to speak boldly. "Second, the selling method in the shop is too rigid. 1 Fulu is 100 spirit jades, 2 Fulu is 200 spirit jades, 10 Fulu is 1000 spirit jades. There is no discount at all, so it is difficult to stimulate the customer's desire to buy. We should set up a variety of selling methods. For example, in the shop, if you spend 500 spirit jades, 50 spirit jades, 1000 spirit jades, 150 spirit jades. If you buy 2 earth-grade Fulu, you will get 1 earth-grade Fulu for free." Li Mu nodded and said, "Well said, continue." Although he understood these things, with his identity, it was not suitable for him to get involved in these trivial matters. He needed a capable assistant, and the young man in front of him was obviously the best candidate. His appearance was not impressive, but he was extremely business-minded. After receiving Li Mu's affirmation, Ma Feng became bolder and said, "The exchange in Xuanzong is only held once every 5 years, and it takes a large amount of our spirit jades. Why don't we set up shops in the sect, or even in the various prefectures of the Great Zhou, or in the various countries of the Zhou province? With the reputation of our Fulu school, business will definitely be 10 or 100 times better than it is now. At this exchange, loose cultivators and cultivation clans from all over the world will gather here. This is a great opportunity for us. We must let the Fulu Pavilion leave a good impression in their hearts." As Ma Feng spoke, he was no longer limited to the Fulu Pavilion, but looked at the entire Zhou province. He planned a path of continuous development for the Fulu school. 2 hours later, he was still talking non-stop. Xuanzong's location is not good. They are located in the easternmost part of the Zhou province. Many cultivators have to travel thousands of li to get here, and the divine capital of the Great Zhou is in the center of the Zhou province. If we can build a market like this in the divine capital of the Great Zhou and invite the various sects and cultivation clans to move in, we will only take 10% of the spirit jades. This will definitely attract everyone. Unfortunately, this will offend Xuanzong, and the Great Zhou court may not agree, although Li Mu also wanted to do this, and this would bring in a large amount of tax for the court. There was no doubt that this would cause Xuanzong to have no business at all. Offending the number 1 sect of Taoism, the strongest power in the Zhou province, was clearly not a good choice at the moment. "We'll talk about this later." Li Mu stood up and gently patted Ma Feng's shoulder. "From now on, I'll leave the Fulu Pavilion to you." Chapter 534. Fulu Pavilion. Li Mu brought Ma Feng in front of Qing Jingzi and said, "This is Ma Feng, a new 4th-generation disciple." Ma Feng hurriedly bowed to Qing Jingzi and said, "Greetings, martial uncle." Now was not the time for the sect to recruit disciples, but the head martial uncle and martial uncle all had special privileges. Qing Jingzi was just surprised. This person's appearance was ordinary and could even be called ugly. His cultivation was pitifully low. Why did martial uncle make an exception and let him in? Thinking back to when he entered the sect, he had passed many trials and eliminated many opponents before successfully becoming a disciple of Fulu school. Li Mu continued to say to Qing Jingzi, "From now on, Ma Feng is the shopkeeper of Fulu Pavilion. You will assist him in managing Fulu Pavilion. The two of you will discuss the matters of the pavilion. If there is anything you cannot decide, then come find me." Qing Jingzi's face was filled with shock. He could not believe his ears. A new 4th-generation disciple had instantly replaced his position to become the manager of the Talisman Pavilion, and this caused him to be unable to accept it for a moment. But he couldn't disobey the orders of his martial uncle, so even if he was displeased in his heart, he could only nod and say, "Yes, martial uncle." Ma Feng took a deep breath and puffed out his chest. He said solemnly to Li Mu, disciple will do his best to not disappoint martial uncle. Qing Jingzi looked at Ma Feng with an unperturbed gaze. He wanted to see what ability this person had to be valued so highly by martial uncle. Even if he was dissatisfied, he still followed Li Mu's orders and cooperated with this person's actions. Ma Feng first found over 10 young and beautiful female cultivators in the market, and he used them to replace the few talisman sect disciples in the pavilion before receiving the guests that came to the talisman pavilion. Moreover, he promised them that he would pay them 10 spirit jades every day, and they would receive a commission of 1 spirit jade for every 100 spirit jades they sold. He called these female cultivators to the second floor and spent an entire 2 hours teaching them how to attract customers and how to promote the goods in the pavilion. He also made a decision on his own. If a customer bought 2 Earth Rank Fulu tickets, they would get a Mystic Rank Fulu ticket. If a customer spent 500 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 50 Fulu tickets. If a customer spent 1,000 Fulu tickets, they would get a discount of 150 Fulu tickets. Qing Jingzi wanted to stop Ma Feng several times, but seeing that Li Mu did not say anything, he forcefully suppressed this thought. He and the Fulu school disciple who had been replaced stood to the side and watched coldly. When this person's various mischievous actions ruined the Fulu pavilion's business, martial uncle knew exactly what this person was capable of. Xuanzong's Daoist Exchange Conference, or Trade Conference, was held every 5 years and lasted for a month. It was a grand event in the cultivation world of the Zhu continent. During the conference, cultivators from all over the Zhu continent would travel thousands of miles to Xuanzong in the East Sea. Most of them were here to exchange for suitable cultivation resources. In the market, several men were walking together. One of them said, "Which one of you will come with me to the Fulu pavilion? I want to buy some offensive Fulu tickets for self-defense." Someone beside him said, "If you want to buy low-rank Fulu tickets, don't go to the Fulu pavilion. It's the same in other shops." The man asked in confusion, "Why? Shouldn't the Fulu school's Fulu tickets be the best?" The man said, "Low-rank Fulu tickets are not difficult. If Fulu school can draw them, other small sects and families can draw them too. There is no difference in effectiveness. Fulu school's tickets are more expensive. Moreover, the Fulu pavilion's disciples are all arrogant. They don't even look us in the eye. If we enter the shop, no one will pay attention to us." After this person spoke, he immediately received the agreement of the people beside him. Brother Su is right. 5 years ago, I went to the Fulu pavilion once. The disciples of these large sects are indeed very arrogant. I know of a small sect that also specializes in Fulu tickets. Their prices are much lower than the Fulu schools. Last time, I bought one from them. In these 5 years, those Fulu tickets have allowed me to escape death several times. I strongly recommend you go to that shop. All right then. If I can save some spirit jades, I also want to buy a magic tool." Just as the group was about to walk past the Fulu pavilion, 2 beautiful female cultivators suddenly came up to them. They smiled and said, "Fellow Taoists, what do you want to buy? Our Fulu pavilion has an event today. If you spend 500 spirit jades in the pavilion, you can return 50 spirit jades. If you spend 1,000 spirit jades, you can return 150 spirit jades." The smiles on the faces of the 2 female cultivators were extremely gentle and beautiful. The business of the Fulu pavilion was closely related to their remuneration. The more customers they received, the more spirit jades they would receive. If rogue cultivators wanted to earn spirit jades to cultivate, they would have to risk their lives every time. How could it be as simple as this? In order to attract customers, they used almost all of their skills. The male cultivators originally didn't plan to come to the Fulu pavilion, but they couldn't resist the enthusiasm of the 2 beautiful female cultivators and entered the shop with some reluctance. The situation inside the Fulu pavilion was completely different from the last time they came. There were no longer stiff faces of the disciples of the Fulu school. Instead, there were beautiful female cultivators with sweet smiles. The 2 female cultivators first brought them to a resting area with tables and chairs. They poured tea for them and then asked with a smile, "Fellow Taoists, what kind of Fulu do you need? Do you need me to introduce it to you?" Sitting on comfortable soft stools and tasting fragrant tea, the male cultivators felt embarrassed even if they wanted to leave. One of the male cultivators' throat moved and he said, "I need some profound rank offensive fulu." One of the female cultivators smiled and said, "Profound rank offensive fulu. I recommend the Guiding Lightning Talisman, Fire Snake Talisman, and Icicle Talisman. The Guiding Lightning Talisman has a sale today. Buy one and get one free. The Fire Snake Talisman and Icicle Talisman can participate in the full discount." The man's companion tugged at his sleeve and said, "Buy one lightning talisman and get one free. This is much more cost-effective than other shops. I've used this talisman to kill several enemies." "You'd better buy more," the male cultivator immediately said. "Then I want 5 guiding lightning talismans." The female cultivator smiled and said, "Do you also need other fulu? For example, the divine travel talisman or something like that?" The male cultivator shook his head and said, "No need. I don't travel often. I don't need the divine travel talisman." The beautiful female cultivator said, "The divine travel talisman is not only useful for traveling. When you encounter a strong enemy, this talisman can also save your life. Especially the high-ranked divine travel talisman. It can make enemies 2 realms higher than you unable to catch up." The male cultivator thought carefully and seemed to be convinced. He nodded and said, "Then give me 2 of the profound rank divine travel talisman." They sat there and tasted tea. Soon, the female cultivator brought them the fulu they needed. The male cultivator paid the spiritual jades and put away the fulu. He said to the people around him, "Do you guys want to buy any fulu?" One of the male cultivators shook his head and said, "I want to buy a magic treasure. We'll go to the North Sex Tool Refining Pavilion later." The female cultivator's expression changed when she heard this. She said unhurriedly, "Fellow Taoist, our Fulu Pavilion also sells magic treasures. Do you want to take a look?" Although the Fulu school specialized in Fulu, there were also elders in the school who knew how to refine tools and elixirs. In the entire Fulu Pavilion, Fulu accounted for 70% of the goods, while elixirs and magic treasures accounted for 30%. The male cultivator said politely, "No need." The female cultivator did not give up. She smiled at him and said, "To be honest, if you want to buy earth rank and heaven rank magic treasures, I certainly recommend you to go to the North Sect. After all, the North Sect is a great tool refining sect. The quality of their high rank magic treasures is unmatched by any other sect. However, if you want to buy low-rank magic treasures, our Fulu Pavilion is not inferior to the North Sect. Moreover, the price is half. If you buy 1 magic treasure in the North Sect, you can buy 2 here." The male cultivator thought carefully and his expression changed. He did not go to buy earth rank and heaven rank magic treasures. He could not afford those magic treasures even if he sold himself. Just as they thought, in terms of low-rank Fulu, some small sects' Fulu quality was not inferior to the Fulu school. As for low-rank magic treasures, the Fulu school would not be inferior to the North Sect. If it was not for the fact that magic treasures had to be produced by the North Sect, then it was not bad to use the Fulu schools. Moreover, the price was much lower than the North Sect's, which made him very tempted. Originally, he could only buy 1 offensive Dharma artifact. Now, he could buy another defensive Dharma artifact. This was an irresistible temptation. He quickly made a decision in his heart. He immediately stood up and said, "Please take me to see the Dharma artifact, at the staircase on the 2nd floor." Qing Jingzi and the other Fulu school disciples looked at the bustling scene on the 1st floor. Their faces were filled with shame. In just 2 hours, the shop's turnover had exceeded theirs in a day. Qing Jingzi finally understood why his uncle master wanted to use this person to replace him. He was sincerely convinced and bowed to Li Mu. "Uncle master has a good eye for people. I admire you from the bottom of my heart." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "You guys go down too. See if there's anything you need help with. Don't just stand here." Including Qing Jingzi, all the disciples went down the stairs. In just a few hours, the shop's situation changed completely. Li Mu knew that professional matters should be left to professionals. Although Qing Jingzi and the other Fulu school disciples were talented and had high cultivation, they were not suitable to sell goods. In terms of business in the cultivation world, the Talisman Charm sect was blessed by the heavens. As one of the 6 sects of Tao, it was a famous brand that had existed for thousands of years. Just its signboard alone was able to attract many customers. If it were to carry out some appropriate marketing methods and bring in some service and sales talents, then the Talisman Pavilion would simply become a large-scale spirit jade machine. Many businesses in the cultivation world were profitable. Not only Fulu School, but also Danding sect, the North and South sects, large and small sects and aristocratic families. The cost of 10 pieces of spirit jade would be sold at least 100 pieces of spirit jade. With a little promotion, buy one get one discount, it would immediately become the conscience of the industry. But the spirit jade would be split with Xuanzong. The better the shop's business, the more Li Mu's heart would ache. But there was no other way. Although Li Mu also wanted to move the shop back to the sect and not give Xuanzong a chance to exploit it, before that, he had to make Fulu Pavilion famous. Xuanzong had his eyes on Fulu School's spirit jade, while Li Mu had his eyes on their influence. In the current cultivation world, only Xuanzong could gather so many cultivators in one place. Li Mu's purpose on this trip was to help Wanwan untie the knot in her heart. He interfered in Fulu Pavilion's business, but he really couldn't stand by and watch. The higher-ups of Fulu School all had profound cultivation and looked down on merchants. But they never thought that without spirit jade, how could low-level disciples improve their cultivation? Without talisman liquid and spiritual medicine reserves, the elders of the sect were about to die. They could only watch helplessly. After all, they were also part of Fulu School. There were some things that Xian Jizi didn't have to worry about, but Li Mu had to worry about him. Fulu Pavilion's business was on the right track for the time being, so Li Mu didn't have to worry too much. He came to Fulu Pavilion's 3rd floor. Wanwan and Xiaobai were playing flying chess, and Qing Xian was watching from the side. Li Mu looked at Qing Xian from afar and said, "Qing Xian, come to my room for a moment." Chapter 535. On the 3rd floor of Fulu Pavilion, Xiaobai and Wanwan were playing aeroplane chess. Occasionally, they would turn their heads to look at a room not far away. Qing Xian and Li Mu's "n" and sounds could be heard from the room. Dragon language was really difficult to learn. At first, they were curious and wanted to learn it, but because it was too difficult, they both gave up very quickly. In the room, Li Mu looked at the strange characters that Qing Xian wrote on the paper and made strange sounds. Qing Xian shook her head and corrected him, "That's not how you pronounce it. Repeat after me %. Li Mu imitated, %. No, it's %. yen %. Qing Xian had to correct him many times before Li Mu finally learned this note. He had always thought that he was smart until he began to learn the dragon language. When he first learned the Xingguo language, it was as easy as blowing off dust. However, the dragon language could not be learned in that way. It could only be taught by a dragon hand in hand and mouth. Li Mu also knew many Fey languages, but none of them were as difficult as dragon language. It made him wonder from time to time if dragon language was the language of this world. After learning for a while, he said to Qing Xian, "Your language is too difficult. If you don't have anything to do tonight, you can stay in my room." With their cultivation, it was no problem for them to not sleep for a few days and nights. Li Mu was now very curious about the dragon race. The first thing he needed to do was to learn dragon language. The Xuanzong exchange conference would last for a month. Li Mu was not in a hurry to go back, since he had traveled thousands of miles to come here. In the next few days, he and Qing Xian stayed in their room and didn't come out at all. They studied day and night. Fulu Pavilion's business was also booming. Among the 6 sex shops, only Fulu School was willing to lower themselves and truly think from the perspective of their customers. In just a few days, the Talisman Pavilion's reputation had spread throughout the market, and the number of customers was increasing day by day. Some customers were even willing to come here to buy low-level elixirs and magic weapons, instead of choosing the Danding sect and the North sect. Pill Cauldron Pavilion, Weapon Forging Pavilion, Spirit Array Pavilion. The disciples of the various sects clearly discovered that the number of customers in their shops for this exchange meeting was much less than in the past. After some investigation, they discovered that many of the customers had been led away by Fulu Pavilion. However, they didn't care too much about it. Cultivators prioritized cultivation. If it weren't for the sect's request, they wouldn't even bother to come here and waste a month doing business. The other sects didn't care, and Xuanzong naturally didn't care either. The better Fulu School's business was, the more benefits Xuanzong would reap. No matter how the other sects and clans competed for customers, Xuanzong would always be the final winner. A few days later, under Qing Xian's tutelage day and night, Li Mu finally managed to reach a rudimentary understanding of dragon language. Of course, he was still far from being able to understand the Dragon King's diary. Today, there was a lecture by Xuanzong. Li Mu planned to go listen. First, he wanted to go out and get some fresh air. Second, he had received Xuanzong's invitation to participate in the lecture. For this exchange meeting, Li Mu was the only second-generation disciple of Fulu School. He still had to give face to Xuanzong. There weren't many people in Fulu Pavilion today. There weren't even many customers in the market. On the neighboring island, a large training hall was packed with people. Today, Xuanzong's experts would be lecturing here. They would also answer some questions about cultivation. It was possible that one sentence from them could save many people months or even years of cultivation. Even cultivators who came for business purposes wouldn't miss such a grand event. At the front of the training hall, there were several seats. Those seats were reserved for the seniors of the 6 sects of Taoism. Generally speaking, those who could sit there were second-generation disciples of the 6 sects of Taoism, Dongshuan's experts. Except for the young man sitting on the left. A few days ago, he spent a lot of money in the market and severely embarrassed Qing Xuanzi. Later, people began to inquire about his identity. They learned that he was the disciple of Fu Daozi, the supreme elder of Fulu School. Although his cultivation wasn't as high as Dongxian, he was a true second-generation disciple of Fulu School. He was in the same generation as the chief and chief of the 6 sects. Below these seats, there were about a dozen seats, which belonged to some well-known cultivation clans and mid-level sects in Zhuzhou, as well as some Xuanzong disciples. As for the others, they could only sit cross-legged on the ground and listen. That's Master Shen of Jing country. The Shen family started with a spiritual jade mine. His family's strength is no weaker than a mid-level sect. I heard that he bought a talisman of creation from Fulu School. A heaven-grade Fulu costs at least 100,000 spiritual jades, and he has to prepare 10 sets of talisman liquid. The Shen family is really rich. The 6 sects have to be the richest. Fulu School sells a Fulu for 100,000 spiritual jades, and he has to prepare his own materials. This is simply robbing spiritual jades, you can't say that. Who doesn't know that the success rate of a heaven-grade Fulu is extremely low? 10 sets of materials may not be enough to make one. Moreover, I heard that the rules of Fulu Pavilion have changed. The Fulu Pavilion doesn't accept spiritual jades before it's completed. It can be said that the 6 sects have a conscience. The crowd kept talking. When more than 10 young disciples of Xuanzong flew down from above and landed on their seats, the cultivators sitting cross-legged in the Taoist field were in an uproar. It's Qing Yunzi. He's only in his 30s, but his cultivation has already reached Dongxian. He's Xuanzong, no, he's the first among the 4th-generation disciples of the 6 sects of Taoism. He's bound to be the next sect master of Xuanzong. Although his cultivation was piled up by Xuanzong with a lot of resources, his talent can't be ignored to be able to push his cultivation to Dongxian in such a short time. Qing Qingzi, Qing Xuanzi, and Xuanzong's young geniuses have all come out. I really envy them. Each of them has amazing talent and has such a powerful sect behind them. Sooner or later, they'll become the strongest in the world. Amidst the discussion, Li Mu's gaze swept across the young disciples. When his gaze swept across a young disciple, he felt a sense of familiarity in his heart. That young disciple called Qing Qingzi gave him a sense of familiarity. However, Li Mu had never been to Xuanzong before, and he didn't know any Xuanzong disciples. He quickly searched through his memory, and soon, this person's figure overlapped with a shadow in Li Mu's memory. A few years ago, when Li Mu was still working in the North County, the wife of the Rat King under the White Demon King was once injured by a human cultivator. The human cultivator who injured the Rat King's wife was the one who killed Xiao Bai's entire family. Xuanzong's Qing Qingzi looked exactly like that person. Not only that, but his aura also reminded Li Mu of the aura that remained in Xiao Bai's grandmother and the Rat King's wife. Just as Li Mu confirmed this person's identity, a fierce shout came from a futon in front of the training hall. "Give me back my grandmother's life." A white figure flew up from the futon. The sword in his hand was already unsheathed, and the tip of the sword was pointed at Qing Qingzi. This sudden change immediately attracted the attention of countless people in front of the training hall. The cultivators in the training ground were extremely shocked. There was actually someone who dared to assassinate a disciple of the Xian sect right in front of the elders of the Xian sect. This kind of suicidal behavior could be considered crazy. Qing Qingzi and the other young disciples didn't expect this to happen. Facing that figure, the others didn't move. They believed that Qing Qingzi could deal with it alone. Qing Qingzi was stunned for a moment. When he came back to his senses, he unsheathed the long sword on his back and faced the figure. After a short exchange, he found that the beautiful woman's cultivation was almost the same as his. He was shocked and confused. When did he provoke such a strong cultivator? Facing such an opponent, Qing Qingzi didn't dare to underestimate her. He immediately used several of his most powerful spells. However, facing his spells, the woman only cared about attacking and didn't defend at all. Every time his attacks landed on her body, they would immediately dissipate. After a short exchange, Qing Qingzi had already determined that the woman not only had a good cultivation, but also had a defensive treasure. He wouldn't be able to defeat her in a short time. Just as he was feeling anxious, the old man in the front seat suddenly stood up and snorted. He said loudly, "Who are you? How dare you come to my Xuanzong?" As soon as he finished speaking, a transparent giant hand appeared in the void and grabbed at the woman. Under the pressure of the giant hand, the cultivators with low cultivation suddenly felt like Mount Tai was pressing down on them. They found it difficult to breathe. Even the strong cultivators in the creation realm found it difficult to breathe. They were shocked by the power of Dongxian. Under the pressure of the giant hand, Xiao Bai couldn't move. She could only watch as the hand grabbed at her. In the next moment, a figure that wasn't very big but made her feel at ease stood in front of her. Li Mu floated in the void in front of Xiao Bai. He didn't do anything. The aura in his body swept out, and the giant hand collapsed. After a moment of silence, there was another uproar. Isn't that the senior from Fulu School? Why is he helping this assassin? Didn't you notice that this female assassin is the beauty who has been following this senior around? What's wrong with Qing Qingzi? He seems to have a death feud with this beauty. This is going to be interesting. The conflict between Fulu School and Xuanzong, as the crowd discussed in low voices, someone suddenly realized something and said in surprise, "The one who attacked just now was Senior Miao Yuanzi from Xuanzong. He has advanced to Dongxian many years ago. This senior from Fulu School is only at the 5th realm, but he blocked Senior Miao Yuanzi's angry attack so easily. It's unbelievable." Only then did the crowd realize this. They all looked at the figure floating in the void with shocked eyes. Among the disciples of Xuanzong, Qing Xuanzi's face was pale. If Elder Miao Yuanzi's palm strike had landed on him, he would have been seriously injured even if he didn't die. However, it was easily resolved by this person. Thinking of the conflict between him and this person, Qing Xuanzi suddenly felt a wave of fear. Li Mu slowly landed and looked back at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai bit her lower lip and tears welled up in her eyes. She choked and said, "Benefactor." Li Mu held her in his arms with one hand and patted her back. He said softly, "I know. Leave the rest to me." Wan Wan and Xing Xian also left the crowd and quickly stood beside Xiao Bai. Li Mu waved his hand and a golden light shot out. Qing Qingzi suddenly felt his waist tighten, and he couldn't circulate his spiritual power. Then, he was dragged to Li Mu by a huge force. At the front of the training hall, Miao Yuanzi looked at Li Mu with a gloomy face and asked, "What is the meaning of this?" Li Mu shook his wrist, and the bound Qing Qingzi knelt on the ground. He looked at Miao Yuanzi with a gloomy face and said, "You connived with your disciples to bring disaster to the great Zhou and kill my sister's family. What right do you have to ask me?" The two looked at each other, and the atmosphere was extremely tense. Beside Miao Yuanzi, a female cultivator stood up and said, "Senior brother Miao Yuanzi, junior brother Ling Jizi, let's sit down and talk. There may be some misunderstanding. The 6 sects are one family. Let's not hurt each other." The people of the Danding sect stood up. Miao Yuanzi's face didn't soften. Instead, he looked at Li Mu and said, "Junior sister Jade's son, you all saw it. Today, it was Fulu School who provoked you first. It wasn't my Xuanzong that was rude." Jade's son walked in front of Li Mu and said, "Junior brother Ling Jizi, let this disciple go first. If there's anything, we can talk about it slowly. After all, this was Xuanzong, and Li Mu wasn't an unreasonable person." He took back the immortal binding lock. Miao Yuanzi waved his sleeve, rolled up Qing Qingzi, and flew up to the Dao Palace. Li Mu followed with Xiao Bai and Wan Wan. Seeing this, Jade's son and the elders of the other 4 sects looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. They also flew up. Even with the Xuanzong elders presiding, the training hall still became chaotic. What's going on? Xuanzong is a righteous sect. How could a disciple of Xuanzong do something like killing people? There must be some kind of misunderstanding. I also think it's a misunderstanding. The disciples of Xuanzong who stayed behind also sighed. Qing Songzi shook his head and sighed. "I've already advised senior brother Qing Qingzi not to be too eager for quick success, but he just wouldn't listen. He likes to kill demons for their demon cores and souls. Now they've come knocking on his door." Although Qing Songzi deliberately lowered his voice when talking to his fellow disciples, there were nearly 10,000 people in the training hall, and many of them had high cultivation. It was easy for them to hear what he said. What? Qing Qingzi likes to kill demons? Isn't this forbidden by the big sects? Besides, the great Zhou court doesn't allow this kind of behavior. Forbidden is forbidden. Killing demons isn't killing people. How could a core disciple like Qing Qingzi be punished by the sect for killing a few demons? So what that senior said is true. So what if it's true? So what if it's false? How can Fulu School's strength compare to Xuanzong? If you were Xuanzong's sect master, would you punish a core disciple for such a small matter and damage the sect's reputation? Hearing the discussion, a Xuanzong female disciple glared at Qing Songzi and said, "Qing Songzi, can you shut your mouth?" Qing Songzi said innocently, "I'm just doing this for senior brother Qing Qingzi's sake. Let's go up and take a look. I don't know how the sect master will punish senior brother Qing Qingzi." Chapter 536. Xuanzong. There were 9 peaks hanging upside down above the East Sea. In the Taoist palace on the 9th peak, the elders of the 6 Taoist sects had gathered. A middle-aged man dressed in colorful robes looked at Qing Qingzi and asked, "Qing Qingzi, is it like what Marshal Granduncle Ling Jizi said, that you have committed such evil deeds in the North County?" Qing Qingzi stood in the hall and said loudly, "Sect master, this lady must have mistaken me for someone else. I have never been to the North County, and it is impossible for me to kill her clan. I am innocent." The Xuanzong sect master, Miao Yunzi, waved his wide sleeves and said, "I believe that junior brother Ling Jizi would not speak without thinking. Your words alone are not enough to convince others. Miao Yuan, take him to Discipline Peak. Whether he is lying or not, the discipline elder will find out." After saying that, he looked at Li Mu and asked, "Is junior brother Ling Jizi satisfied with this?" At least so far, as the Xuanzong sect master and a 7th realm expert, Miao Yunzi had shown enough sincerity. He did not protect the disciples of the sect, but dealt with them according to the rules of the Xuanzong sect. Li Mu had no objections to this. He held Xiao Bai's hand and gave her a comforting look. After Qing Qingzi was taken away, the atmosphere in the Taoist palace was gloomy. Jade Sun took the initiative to speak and said with a smile, "It has only been a year since we parted in the Demon Nation, but junior brother Ling Jizi's cultivation has already reached the peak of the creation realm. It really makes me feel ashamed. I'm afraid that Fulu School will have another expert soon." Li Mu had a good impression of this senior sister of the Danding sect. He smiled and said, "I just encountered some opportunities." Jade Sun said, "Junior brother, there is no need to be humble. As cultivators, opportunities and talent are indispensable. The so-called opportunities are also strength." Inside the Taoist palace, while Li Mu and Jade Sun were chatting, Qin Qingzi's face was pale and his body was trembling slightly in Xuanzong Discipline Peak. Standing in front of him was not only the Discipline Peak elder, but there were also 2 martial granduncles of the Miao generation and 2 grand elders of the Dao generation. Besides the sect master, Xuanzong's 7th realm elders were all here. An old man with a face full of wrinkles, white eyebrows, and a white beard said with a gloomy expression, "Such a thing actually happened during the exchange that occurs once every 5 years. Does the Talisman Puppet sect even respect my profound sect?" The other old man next to him narrowed his eyes and said, "Maybe they think that because Fulu School has a 4th transcendent cultivator, they can compare to Xuanzong. If I remember correctly, the 2 from Fulu School have less than 2 years left. In 2 years, Fulu School will be the weakest of the 6 sects. They can't even compare to Danding sect and Spirit Formation sect." Only Daoist Miao Dan looked at Qin Qingzi and asked seriously, "Did you really kill that fox demon?" Qin Qingzi knew that he couldn't hide it in front of these elders. He said regretfully, "I didn't know that the fox demon was the sister of the Fulu School's martial granduncles." Daoist Miao Dan said angrily, "I didn't expect you to do such a thing. Come, let's go see the sect master." Elder Bai Mei looked at Daoist Miao Dan and said, "Wait." Daoist Miao Dan frowned and said, "Martial uncle, Qin Qingzi violated the sect rules." Elder Bai Mei looked at her and said, "In the Miao generation, your talent is second only to your senior brother. Now, even Miao Xian and Fulu School's Yuzhen have already transcended. But you're still in Dongxian. Stay in the sect and cultivate. Break through as soon as possible. Don't worry about anything else. Martial uncle. You can leave." Daoist Miao Dan looked at Elder Bai Mei. After taking a deep breath, she bowed and said, "This disciple will take her leave." After she left, Elder Bai Mei glanced at Qin Qingzi and said, "It's just killing a few demons. Those who are not of our race must have a different heart. The great Zhou court is muddle-headed and treats demons as common people. Sooner or later, they will be harmed. Now that all the cultivators in Zhu province are gathered here, if we punish a Xuanzong disciple for a few demons, won't we, Xuanzong, be ridiculed by all the cultivators in the world?" Qin Qingzi was overjoyed. Since the Grand Elder said so, he had nothing to worry about. The other Xuanzong elders also fell into deep thought. The Grand Elder's words made sense. If it were any other time, given the relationship between Fulu School and Xuanzong, an ordinary Xuanzong disciple would probably be expelled from the sect for committing such a big mistake. Even a 4th-generation core disciple like Qin Qingzi would be severely punished. But now it was the quinquennial Daoist exchange. All the Daoist cultivators in Zhu province were gathered in Xuanzong. If this matter were to spread, it would damage Xuanzong's reputation. As the top sect of Taoism, Xuanzong's reputation was much more important than a 4th-generation disciple. Elder Bai Mei looked coldly at Qin Qingzi and said, "From now on, you are not allowed to leave the sect until you reach Dongxian." Qin Qingzi had just reached the 5th realm. Although he could enjoy a lot of resources in the sect, he did not know how long it would take for him to reach the 6th realm. Although he was unwilling, he could only bow and say respectfully, as the Grand Elder commands. Xuanzong, Peak Daoist Palace. Li Mu was still talking with Jade Sun when Miao Yuanzi flew in alone. Miao Yunzi asked, "What's the result?" Miao Yuanzi cupped his fists and said, "Sect Master Senior Brother, just now at Discipline Peak, Grand Elder personally performed a soul search on Qin Qingzi. This matter is indeed not his doing. There should be a misunderstanding." Miao Yunzi frowned imperceptibly and asked, what about Qing Qingzi? Miao Yuanzi said, although this matter was not done by Qing Qingzi, as a disciple of Xuanzong, he embarrassed Xuanzong in front of so many Daoist cultivators. Uncle Master has already punished him to face the wall in seclusion. He is not allowed to come out for 10 years. The 4 elders of Danding sect, Spirit Array sect, and the South and North sects heard Miao Yuanzi's words and their expressions changed subtly. Miao Yunzi was silent for a moment and said, I'll go see the Grand Elder. An old man floated in from outside and said lightly, no need. If you want to see this old man, you can say it here. Miao Yunzi cupped his fists and said, greetings, Uncle Master. Jade Sun and the others also bowed and saluted, greetings, Uncle Master Dao Qingzi. Today's Xuanzong, the Daoist names of the 1st to 4th generation disciples were Dao, Miao, Hua, and Qing. Dao Qingzi was a famous Daoist powerhouse who was 1 generation higher than the 6 sect masters. Miao Yunzi looked at the white-browed old man and asked, Uncle Master, Qing Qingzi. The white-browed old man said, I've already punished Qing Qingzi. How did you become the sect master? When your master was still in power, Xuanzong was so powerful. In your generation, you were framed, and you didn't even protect your own disciple. If senior brother knew about this in the underworld, I'm afraid he would doubt his original decision and regret passing the position of sect master to you. After reprimanding Miao Yunzi, he looked at Li Mu and said in a deep voice, you insulted my Xuanzong. For the sake of the Fulu school, I won't argue with a junior like you this time. If there's a next time, I'll destroy your cultivation and let Xian Jizi come to Penglai Mountain personally to take you back. As his voice fell, he flicked his sleeves and left. Inside the Dao Palace, Miao Yunzi's expression was complicated. He looked at Li Mu and his lips moved, junior brother. Li Mu smiled and said, fellow Daoist, there's no need to say more. Since it's a misunderstanding, I apologize to Xuanzong for my impulse just now. Goodbye. After that, he held Xiao Bai's hand and strode out of the Dao Palace. Miao Yunzi looked at Li Mu's back and sighed softly. One called him junior brother, and the other called him fellow Daoist. This change in address indicated that the relationship between Xuanzong and the Fulu school could no longer be the same as before. Outside the Dao Palace, many Xuanzong disciples stood in the distance with different expressions. Some looked ashamed, some looked smug. Qing Xuanzi's face lit up with joy. He looked at Li Mu with a mocking expression and snorted, so what if you're a 2nd-generation disciple of the Fulu school? You're only asking for humiliation if you try to provoke the dignity of Xuanzong. As Li Mu flew down, a figure flew from behind. Jade Sun flew to his side and comforted him, junior brother, don't be impulsive. This is Xuanzong. You're alone and weak. Once you're impulsive, you'll be bullied by them. Li Mu smiled and said, thank you for your reminder, senior sister. I won't be impulsive. Looking at Li Mu's back, Jade Sun thought for a moment and took out a sound transmission instrument. After hesitating for a long time, she injected her spiritual energy. A white light flashed on the instrument. Jade Sun took a deep breath and whispered a few words into the instrument. At the entrance of the Fulu pavilion, Xiao Bai bit her lips and wiped her tears. She looked up at Li Mu and said, benefactor, I won't take revenge. Li Mu reached out and held her face. He wiped away her tears and said softly, I promise you, I'll let you kill your enemy and avenge your grandmother and your clan. He looked up at the countless mountains floating in the sky and a smile appeared on his face. He said lightly, Xuanzong, the sound transmission instrument in the storage space vibrated. Li Mu took out an object and said calmly, senior brother. Xian Jizi's voice came from the instrument, junior sister Jade Sun has already told me about what happened in Xuanzong. Xuanzong is the #1 sect of Taoism. Its strength is tyrannical. Li Mu asked, does senior brother want to persuade me to let the matter rest? From the instrument, Xian Jizi's voice gradually became cold. Xuanzong is the #1 sect of Taoism. Its strength is tyrannical. However, my Fulu school is not made of mud. Junior brother, please bear with it for half a day. 2 martial uncles and junior sister are already on their way to Xuanzong. Chapter 537. Xuanzong, on the Taoist field. A Xuanzong Dongxian elder replaced Miao Yuanzi and preached to the tens of thousands of cultivators in the field. Most of what he talked about was the foundation of cultivation. At this moment, some people in the field were seriously comprehending, while others were still curious about the result of the incident just now. Although Xuanzong was powerful, Fulu school was also one of the 6 Taoist sections. They wondered if Xuanzong would disregard the brotherhood of the sect for an inner disciple. Soon, Qing Yunzi, Qing Songzi, Qing Xuanzi, and several other 4th-generation disciples returned to the field from the Taoist palace above. Then, a stream of light flashed and Miao Yuanzi floated in the air. He looked at the crowd and said lightly, "What happened just now was a misunderstanding. Now that it has been clarified, there is no need to think too much." Although Miao Yuanzi said so, there were more than 10,000 people in the field, and there was no lack of clever people. How could they not know the deeper meaning of his words? If it was really a misunderstanding, the senior from Fulu school would have appeared with him at this moment, but he was alone at this moment. It seemed that Xuanzong chose to protect the disciples of his sect for the sake of face, and did not care about the feelings of Fulu school at all. Even if they felt that this was not a good move, Xuanzong undoubtedly had the strength to do so. In the world of cultivation, strength was everything. Without strength, there was no right to reason. This was the sorrow of weak forces, but they did not expect that the powerful Fulu school would have such a day. As the number 1 Taoist sect, Xuanzong had strength above all in the world of cultivation. Everything included the other 5 sections. In the field, no one blamed Xuanzong, and few people sympathized with Fulu school, because this was the rule of the world of cultivation. At this time, in the market, the cultivators who did not go to listen to the preaching were almost crazy. The Fulu Pavilion had just released the news that they would sell Fulu books below the heaven rank for free. They did not need spiritual jades, and as long as they provided materials for writing talismans, the Fulu Pavilion would write talismans for them for free. The yellow rank Fulu Pavilion provided 1 portion of talisman fluid, 2 portions of profound rank, and 4 portions of earth rank. The Fulu school would then write corresponding talismans for them. Everyone knew that the higher the level of the Fulu, the lower the success rate of forming a talisman. If one went to any sect or family that was good at Fulu and asked for an earth rank Fulu, which one of them would not ask for more than 10 portions of spiritual liquid and a large amount of spiritual jades? As long as they asked for 4 portions of spiritual liquid, they would be guaranteed an earth rank Fulu. What was the difference between this and giving them for free? No, this wasn't a free gift. This was simply Fulu school making a loss. The only troublesome thing was that they could only register now. The Fulu had to be collected in 3 months at the Fulu Pavilion in Chengdu, Great Zhou. No one suspected anything fishy, because the Fulu Pavilion did not want their talisman fluid or their spiritual jades. They only needed to register here, and then 3 months later, bring their talisman fluid or spiritual jades converted from talisman fluid to Chengdu, Great Zhou. The Fulu school would then fulfill its promise. As a great sect with 1,000 years of history, the Fulu school's reputation was not to be doubted. Although the process was a bit troublesome, the return was huge. For a time, there was a long line at the entrance of the Fulu Pavilion. In the market square, no matter if it was the shops on the street or the small stalls in the square, there was not a single customer. Many stall owners and shopkeepers had already packed up their stalls and shops and formed a long line at the entrance of the Fulu Pavilion. Inside the Fulu Pavilion, the disciples and the cultivators who had come at the last minute were furiously writing down the information of the people who had ordered the Fulu. Ma Feng maintained the discipline of the crowd. He gritted his teeth and said, "Damn Xuanzong, I'm not giving you a single piece of spiritual jade." The cultivators in the line outside all had Dharma sound transmission artifacts and were constantly communicating. "Second uncle, hurry up and close the shop. Come to the Fulu Pavilion, father, hurry up and prepare some spiritual medicine and spiritual jades. We're going to Chengdu, Great Zhou right now. Old Ma, are you at the training hall? Don't listen. Why are you still listening to such useless things at a time like this? Hurry up and come to the Fulu Pavilion. There's a big bargain. Don't blame me for not reminding you if you're late. In the Xuanzong training hall, Miao Yuanzi was preaching. At some point in time, cultivators began to leave one after another. In the past, when he preached, this kind of situation would occur, but it was never on such a scale. Some of them left in a hurry after receiving the message from the Dharma sound transmission artifact. Some saw the people around them leave and also left after asking. When nearly 1,000 people left inexplicably, some Xuanzong disciples went to investigate and finally found the source of this matter. On the celestial mountain floating at the highest point of the sea, a Xuanzong elder said to Miao Yuanzi, "Sect Master, the Fu Lu school's actions have broken the rules of the market. We can't allow them to continue like this." Miao Yuanzi felt guilty in his heart. When he heard this, he only waved his hand and said, "Let them be." The elder frowned slightly. "But Sect Master, this goes against the rules set by me, Xuanzong." Miao Yuanzi glanced at him and said, "I said, don't interfere in this matter." The elder looked up at him and slowly retreated. After leaving the Taoist palace, he flew to another mountain. In the Taoist palace, Taoist Master Miao Dan looked at Miao Yuanzi and asked, "Senior brother, don't you think that Xuanzong has changed and is no longer the Xuanzong of the past?" Miao Yuanzi looked in the direction that the elder disappeared and sighed. In the end, he was indifferent and speechless. Not long after, accompanied by two elders, Daoist Qingzi flew out of the mountain and went straight to the market below. His face was gloomy and he said in a low voice, "It seems that the Fu Lu school really doesn't take Xuanzong seriously these years. Since that's the case, I'll teach this arrogant disciple a lesson on behalf of Fu Daozi, on the third floor of the Fu Lu pavilion." There was an hourglass on the table in front of Li Mu. It was the hourglass that he used to keep track of time when refining pills. At this moment, the sand in the hourglass was almost gone and there was only a small handful left. Before the sand was completely gone, a powerful aura suddenly came from the top of the Fu Lu pavilion. It was the aura of Xuanzong's Grand Elder, Daoist Qingzi. Daoist Qingzi's figure flew from above and he said angrily, "Junior of the Fu Lu school, you've repeatedly challenged my, Xuanzong's, bottom line today. I'll teach you a lesson on behalf of Fu Daozi." The voice of Xuanzong's Grand Elder reverberated in the market and into the ears of countless cultivators. At this moment, everyone's impression of the Fu Lu school had improved greatly. Xuanzong's behavior just now was extremely immoral, and now it was even more outrageous. A Grand Elder of a sect with a cultivation of the 7th realm was bullying a 5th realm junior. How could such behavior be done by a fellow Daoist? Just as the surrounding cultivators began to sympathize with the young man from the Fu Lu school, on the 3rd floor of the Fu Lu pavilion, Li Mu looked at the remaining sand in the hourglass and took a step forward. He was already outside the Fu Lu pavilion. He looked directly at Daoist Qingzi and said coldly, "Xuanzong, you shameless old man. Do you think you're qualified to teach me a lesson on behalf of my master?" There was a long line of cultivators at the entrance of the Fu Lu pavilion. When Li Mu's voice rang out, the noisy market instantly fell silent. If Xuanzong scolded their Grand Elder like this, the Fu Lu school would probably completely fall out with Xuanzong this time. Although this sentence pleased many cultivators, they also knew that this young man's fate would probably be very miserable. After all, there was an insurmountable gap between their cultivation levels. Daoist Qingzi also did not expect this young man to be so presumptuous. His face instantly darkened. In the void, an invisible hand grabbed at Li Mu. It was the same divine power that Miao Yuanzi had used, but its power was completely different. Li Mu felt that his body was trapped by the power of heaven and earth and could not move at all. Even the ordinary Dongxian could only watch as the giant hand grabbed at him, let alone the creation realm cultivators. This reminded Li Mu of the first time he met the Lord of Illusions. However, he was no longer the weak cultivator with divine power that he used to be. Li Mu used his mind to disperse the power of heaven and earth around him. The law bell flew out of his body and merged with Li Mu's body. At the same time, a Fu Lu talisman appeared in Li Mu's hand. He used his dermic powers to activate the talisman. The Fu Lu burned, and the shadow of a woman walked out of the Fu Lu. She exuded the aura of a 6th realm cultivator. Below, the crowd exclaimed in surprise. He's actually planning to resist. This aura. Is this a heaven-grade golden armor divine army talisman? It seems a little different. Even a heaven-grade divine army talisman is useless. A sixth realm cultivator is no threat to Elder Dao Qingzi. To everyone's surprise, the shadow of the woman who walked out of the Fulu didn't attack Dao Qingzi. Instead, she merged with the young man from the Fulu school, causing his aura to rise to the sixth realm in an instant. The invisible giant hand was already reaching for him. Li Mu didn't dodge. The bell's shadow on his body flashed, and the giant hand collapsed. The bell's shadow also collapsed and dissipated. He knew very well that the Empress Divine Avatar wouldn't exist in his body for long. Before Dao Qingzi could do anything else, he had already launched an attack. He used his mind to control the power of heaven and earth. Wind and thunder intertwined around Dao Qingzi. The sixth realm elders of the Black Sect who had rushed over after hearing the commotion felt a chill in their hearts when they saw the wind and thunder. This was definitely a supernatural power that only a sixth realm cultivator could use. Dao Qingzi stood where he was and looked at Li Mu indifferently. A protective shield appeared around his body, blocking the astral wind and lightning outside his body. The next moment, dark clouds suddenly gathered above his head. Wind mixed with black raindrops fell, and the shield around Dao Qingzi's body started to thin rapidly. The dragon clans call the wind and summon the rain. A hint of shock flashed across his eyes. Outsiders might not know, but he knew better than anyone else that the power of these spells was comparable to that of the most powerful cultivators in Dongxian. Of course, this was far from enough for him. He floated in the air and only maintained the shield. He didn't do anything else. Even with his status and position, he had failed to capture a fifth-level junior personally. If he were to make a move again, even he would lose face. When he used all his trump cards and completely understood that the gap between the two realms couldn't be closed no matter what he did, he would realize how laughable he was. He would become a joke who overestimated himself and was like an ant trying to shake a tree. Countless elders from Xuanzong had already flown out. They floated quietly outside, and no one intervened. If they had to intervene in the battle between the Grand Elder and the junior from Fulu School, after this exchange, Xuanzong would also become the biggest joke in Zhuzhou. However, they looked at Li Mu with fear that shouldn't exist. The disciples of the Qing generation looked at the battle in the sky. Instead of fear, they were shocked and terrified. This person was only the same age as them, but he could already fight the Grand Elder. Even if he lost in the end, no one had the right to laugh at him. In the sky, Li Mu didn't have time to pay attention to the discussions below. Without a doubt, without relying on the Empress or the demonic corpse, Dao Qingzi was the most powerful enemy he had ever encountered. His most powerful attack couldn't even break through the defense set up by Dao Qingzi. There seemed to be a natural barrier between the two of them. No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't cross it. If he couldn't fight head-on, he could only use his wits. Li Mu took a deep breath. His Qingxian sword flew out instantly, turning into sword shadows that filled the sky, and attacked Dao Qingzi. Tens of thousands of swords flew out. A sixth realm elder from Xuanzong narrowed his eyes. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "What a powerful Daoist technique. With this technique, he can probably fight Dongxian as a creation and transcend as a Dongxian." With his current cultivation level, not many people in Xuanzong can take this technique head-on. Jade Sun floated in the distance and murmured, "This Daoist technique has probably touched the edge of the seventh realm." In other words, if we really fight, we won't be his match at all. Dao Qingzi's expression was still calm as he looked at the sword shadows that filled the sky. However, a hint of seriousness appeared in his eyes. He strengthened the shield outside his body. The sword shadows crashed into the shield and collapsed one after another. However, the dermic power shield also thinned at a speed visible to the naked eye before finally dissipating. However, there were only a few sword shadows left. Dao Qingzi's dermic power swept out. He stared at Li Mu indifferently and said, "Junior, what other skills do you have? Show them all." Before he finished speaking, his eyes narrowed. The last few sword shadows collapsed under the sweep of his dermic power. However, there was still an illusory sword that didn't slow down. It pierced through his forehead at a speed that couldn't be dodged. The small sword pierced through his forehead. Dao Qingzi's body wasn't injured at all, but his primordial spirit was instantly injured. Under the gaze of countless ancestral state cultivators, Xuanzong disciples, and elders, their Grand Supreme Elder spat out a mouthful of blood. His aura instantly weakened by half. He was injured. He was injured at the hands of a 7th Realm junior. Countless people were shocked. Their faces were filled with disbelief. A 7th Realm transcendent expert was injured by a 5th Realm cultivator? Outside the Fulu Pavilion, the Fulu school disciples' breathing quickened. Their bodies trembled as they stared at the figure floating in the air. This was their martial uncle and martial granduncle. This was the integrity of the Fulu school. 2 streams of tears slowly fell from Xiao Bai's limpid eyes. Unlike the Fulu school disciples, her eyes were filled with affection as she looked at the figure. In the air, Li Mu's face was pale. He imitated Dao Qingzi's tone and said indifferently, "Old thing, you're still pretending?" Chapter 538. The market, the training ground, and the countless figures floating in the air were all silent. Only Li Mu's voice echoed on the sea. Just now, everyone had witnessed a miracle. A cultivator in the creation realm had actually injured a transcendent realm cultivator in a head-on battle, but he himself was unharmed. This battle was enough to be recorded in the history of the cultivation world. When future generations mentioned the Fulu school and Xuanzong at the same time, they couldn't ignore this battle that spanned 2 major realms. The elders of Xuanzong floated in the air, still motionless. It wasn't that they didn't want to move, but that they couldn't. The Grand Elder was in the 7th Realm, fighting against a 5th Realm junior. Did he need their help? Now that things had developed to this point, it was completely out of Xuanzong's control. It was the opposite of their original goal. Xuanzong had protected Qing Qingzi because he didn't want the school to be disgraced. Now, all the cultivators on the Zhu continent knew that Xuanzong had protected his disciple and bullied the weak. The Grand Elder's face had been beaten to the ground, and Xuanzong's face had been completely destroyed. If they had known that things would come to this, they would have punished Qing Qingzi severely. But now, this had nothing to do with Qing Qingzi. Xuanzong needed to establish his authority and regain his lost face. In the air, Dao Qingzi's vital spirit was injured, and his aura was weakened. His face was extremely pale, but not because of his injury, but because of the humiliation. He had been humiliated by a junior in front of all the disciples of Xuanzong, and in front of more than 10,000 cultivators. At this moment, he wanted to kill that person for the first time. His voice was cold as he said word by word, "Junior, you disrespected your elders and deceived your master. Today, I will punish you on behalf of Fulu School." After all, Dao Qingzi was a super expert who had reached the 7th level many years ago. If Li Mu hadn't caught him off guard and mixed the intellectual sword into the 10,000 sword shadows, he wouldn't have been able to injure Dao Qingzi at all. When he was in the 5th realm, his wisdom sword could slash Dongxuan's primordial spirit. Now that his cultivation had temporarily increased to the 6th realm, he could only slightly injure Dao Qingzi. However, he wasn't afraid of Dao Qingzi. In the face of Dao Qingzi's threat, Li Mu ignored it. He turned around and flew toward the Fulu Pavilion. At the same time, on the 3rd floor of Fulu Pavilion, the last strand of sand fell from the hourglass. Dao Qingzi's killing intent surged as he raised a hand at Li Mu's back. But at this moment, 3 streams of light suddenly appeared on the western horizon and sped over. A loud voice exploded in the sky. "Dao Qingzi, do you think everyone in Fulu School is dead?" A huge black sword came from afar and pointed directly at Dao Qingzi. Dao Qingzi hurriedly took out a square shield. The huge sword collided with the square shield and sent Dao Qingzi flying for thousands of feet. The 2 Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elders who had just arrived didn't intend to let him go and chased after him. A Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elder said in shock, "It's Martial Uncle Tian Yangzi and Martial Uncle Tian Qingzi. They actually came in person." Tian Yangzi and Tian Qingzi were famous Daoist experts. The two 7th Realm Grand Supreme Elders of Fulu School appeared here at this moment. It meant that ever since that incident, Fulu School didn't plan to be friendly with Xuanzong. On the ground, countless ancestral state cultivators were dumbfounded. Today was really an eye-opener for them. Not only did they see Dongxian Transcendence experts injured, but they also saw a battle between Transcendence experts. This trip to Xuanzong was really worth it. Li Mu landed on the ground and walked all the way to Fulu Pavilion. Everywhere he went, the bustling crowd automatically made way for him. Yuzhen Zi didn't participate in the battle. Instead, he immediately flew to Li Mu's side and asked with concern, "Are you okay?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm fine. Senior sister, I've made you worry." The spiritual snail in the storage space had been vibrating for a while. Li Mu took out the spiritual snail and injected magic power. The Empress's voice immediately sounded, "What happened on your side?" "I felt that you used that avatar," Li Mu said. "It's already taken care of. It's not convenient to talk about it now. I'll explain it to your majesty when we return to the divine capital." Zhou Yi asked again, "Are you okay?" Li Mu said, "I'm fine. Your majesty, don't worry." In the Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi didn't ask any more questions. He took the initiative to put away the spiritual snail and then said to Mr. Mei, "He should be in Xuanzong now. Order the officials of the East County to investigate what happened in Xuanzong." At the entrance of Fulu Pavilion, Li Mu said to Qing Jingzi, "Pack up and prepare to return to the divine capital." Qing Jingzi led the disciples back to the pavilion to pack up. At this time, a female cultivator walked to Li Mu and asked nervously, "Senior, can we stay in Fulu Pavilion?" Behind her, there were more than 10 pretty female cultivators. They looked at Li Mu nervously. These female cultivators were the shop assistants that Ma Feng recruited. Li Mu said to them, "There won't be Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong anymore. If you're willing, there's still a place for you in the new Fulu Pavilion in the divine capital of Great Zhou." The girls said in unison, "We're willing." The female cultivators happily went to Fulu School to help pack up. Li Mu looked up at the sky. Dao Qingzi was already slightly injured. Under the siege of 2 Grand Supreme Elders, he was in a sorry state. The other 2 level 7 cultivators in Xuanzong couldn't sit still anymore. They flew up to stop them. "Uncle Masters, let's talk. Let's sit down and talk. Don't hurt our friendship." Tian Yangzi attacked with all his strength. He said coldly, "Friendship? My ass. Dao Qingzi is going to clean up our Fulu school. What's there to talk about? I don't have much time left, but my Fulu school isn't a place that anyone can mess with. If you want to humiliate my Fulu school, wait until I'm dead." The Xuanzong Taoist priest said, "Fulu school and Xuanzong are brothers. Uncle Masters, please stop. Don't hurt our friendship." Tian Qingzi trapped the 2 Xuanzong Grand Supreme Elders with his Fulu. His voice was equally cold. "When you, Xuanzong, covered up your disciples and humiliated my Fulu school, why didn't you think of your brothers?" The injured Dao Qingzi was forced to retreat in defeat by Tian Yangzi. The other 2 Grand Supreme Elders were also trapped. Xuanzong had 5 7th Realm cultivators. Only Miao Yunzi and another Grand Supreme Elder were left. At a certain moment, an angry roar came from an upside-down mountain. An old man flew out and said angrily, "Tian Yangzi, Tian Qingzi, don't go too far." He wanted to help Dao Qingzi but was stopped by Yuzhen. The old man looked at Yuzhen and said gloomily, "Nephew Yuzhen, you want to stop me?" Yuzhen looked at him indifferently and said coldly, "When Dao Qingzi bullied my junior brother, did you ever think that he was your nephew?" The cultivators below looked up at the sky in silence. 7th Realm cultivators were always elusive. Ordinary people rarely saw them. Today, they saw 7 of them at the same time. 7 transcending state cultivators were fighting in a chaotic battle. High up in the sky, the light of spells was unceasing. If their battle was on the ground, the whole of Xuanzong would probably be destroyed. Even from so far away, everyone could feel the waves of pressure. No matter what the result was, Xuanzong's reputation was completely destroyed this time. In the Taoist palace on the highest mountain, the bright light of spells shone into the palace. Miao Dun looked at Miao Yunzi and asked, "You're not going to help?" Miao Yunzi shook his head. "No." Miao Dun said, "If you don't help, Uncle Master will have an excuse later." Miao Yunzi breathed a sigh of relief and said, "I've been in the sect for too long. I'm bored. I'm just thinking of going out for a walk." Miao Dun was silent for a moment and said, "I also want to go out for a walk and find an opportunity to break through." In the market and on the training grounds, the cultivators of the Zhu continent had been looking up for a long time. The battle in the sky didn't have a result. Obviously, the Fulu school and Xuanzong had a big conflict. The three elders of the Fulu school came from afar, but the cultivators of the two sects couldn't really fight to the death. Up in the sky, the battle was still going on. However, at a certain moment, everyone suddenly disappeared. After a moment of shock, everyone was in an uproar. Where are they? Why did they all disappear? Strange. Why can't I see anyone? In an instant, the elders of the two sects disappeared. At the entrance of the Fulu pavilion, Li Mu's vision blurred. When he reappeared, he was in another space. This space was very big, much bigger than the Empress' secret garden, but not as big as Li Mu's Demon Emperor's space. Other than the size, there was a big difference between this space and Li Mu's Demon Emperor's space. After the Demon Emperor's space had a new master, it went from being dead silent to full of vitality. There were mountains, rivers, lakes, grass, trees, fish, and insects. It was like a small world. Although there were mountains, rivers, trees, and grass in this space, there was no life. The mountains were gray. The trees on the mountains were withered. There wasn't a trace of green. The water was black. There wasn't a single fish swimming in the water. The grass under Li Mu's feet was yellow. The entire space was dead silent. The two Taishang elders and Yuzenzi were beside Li Mu. In front of them were the four elders of Xuanzong. In the middle of the withered grass, an old man sat cross-legged. The old man had no eyebrows or beard. There were only a few strands of messy hair on his bald head. Wrinkles crisscrossed his face, mixed with brown patches. He sat there with his eyes closed and his head bowed. There was no breath coming from him. He was like a dead man. But in Li Mu's eyes, what sat there was not a person, but a mountain. This mountain stood tall and lofty, unreachable. Chapter 539. The elders of the Fulu school and Xuanzong were originally at daggers drawn, but the moment they saw this old man, they restrained their fighting spirit and became respectful. "Greetings, martial uncle." Everyone bowed respectfully, and even the two grand elders of the Talisman Puppet sect were no exception. The old man opened his eyes. Li Mu discovered that his eyes were turbid and lifeless, his pupils unfocused and unfocused. He seemed to be blind. He faced Li Mu's group of four and said in a low voice, "Have you caused enough trouble? If you've caused enough trouble, then go back." Although the old man was blind, when he faced Li Mu still felt as if a pair of eyes were piercing through his body. When facing Dao Qingzi, he still had the will to fight, but in front of this old man, he simply could not summon any fighting spirit. Yuzhen's lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but a grand elder stopped him and bowed. "Sorry to disturb you, martial uncle." He waved his sleeves, swept up Li Mu and Yuzhen's grand elder, and flew upwards. After flying past a certain height, Li Mu's surroundings changed, and he once again returned to the sky above Xuanzong. From beginning to end, the old man had only said one sentence, and it was enough to extinguish the anger of the two grand elders and make them take the initiative to retreat. The old man's identity was already on the verge of being revealed. It was rumored that Xuanzong, as the number one sect of the Taoism, had a deep foundation, and even had an eighth realm expert within the sect. Today, Li Mu knew that this was not a legend. The seventh realm expert gave Li Mu the feeling of a tall mountain, but it was not unreachable. He could always see the summit, but in this tall mountain, Li Mu could see the clouds halfway up the mountain. As for how high it was beyond the clouds, he could not even imagine it. Yuzhen's grand elder frowned. Martial uncle, the disciple that Xuanzong is protecting. Tianyangzi shook his head and looked at Li Mu. Child, it's because the sect isn't strong enough that you have to suffer. The Taishang elder didn't say it explicitly, but Li Mu understood what he meant. Xuanzong's 8th level cultivator had made his stance clear. It was impossible to take Qing Qingzi away from Xuanzong. Above transcendence was unification of the way. In the entire ancestral state, among the 6 Daoist sects and the great Zhou court, only Xuanzong had such a powerhouse. No one could defy his will. Li Mu bowed to the 3 and said, "Many thanks, martial uncles and senior sister Yuzhen." The 2 elders smiled and said, "Before we 2 old men die, no one can bully you for no reason." At the entrance of Fulu Pavilion, Qing Jingzi had already gathered all the disciples of Fulu school, including the dozen or so female cultivators. The Taishang elder released a giant boat and everyone flew onto it. Li Mu stood at the bow of the boat, raised his hand, and gently pressed down. An enormous handprint appeared in the sky above the talisman pavilion. Boom! There was a loud noise and dust. From then on, there was no more Fulu Pavilion in Xuanzong. Li Mu looked around and imprinted everything here in his mind. One day, he would return to this place. Soon, the flying boat turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky, disappearing into the horizon. Countless cultivators looked into the distance. They would never forget their experience in Xuanzong, nor would they forget the immortal legend who dared to fight a transcendence cultivator with a creation realm cultivation. The name of Fulu School's Li Mu would soon be known by everyone in the cultivation world of ancestral state. Xuanzong. On the highest floor of the Taoist palace, cultivators above the 6th level of Xuanzong were gathered. Dao Qingzi looked coldly at Miao Yunzi and asked in a deep voice, as the headmaster of Xuanzong, "When the people of Fulu School attacked the mountain gate, you just stood by and watched. What right do you have to be the headmaster?" Faced with his rebuke, Miao Yunzi took off the Taoist crown on his head and said, "You're right, Uncle Master. From today onwards, I will resign as the headmaster and go out to wander the world to seek the way. The headmaster position will be temporarily taken by other brothers. Senior brother, please reconsider." Several people in the Taoist palace changed their expressions and tried to persuade him. Miao Yunzi just waved his hand and said, "I've made up my mind. There's no need to say more." Dao Qingzi picked up the Taoist crown that symbolized the position of the headmaster of Xuanzong and said lightly, "You are a sinner of Xuanzong. You are indeed unfit to be the headmaster. Miao Xuanzi, you will temporarily take the headmaster position." A figure stood out and took the Taoist crown. He said respectfully, "Yes, master." The Grand Elder acted arbitrarily and forced the headmaster to abdicate and let his disciple take over. This caused many elders to be dissatisfied. How can the headmaster position be decided by the Grand Elder alone? Grand Elder, you're overstepping your bounds. Even if someone takes over the headmaster position temporarily, he has to ask Elder Tian Jizi before making a decision. Faced with the overbearing Grand Elder, everyone spoke up until a figure slowly walked into the Taoist palace from outside. The old man had his hands behind his back and his body was hunched. He limped as if he could fall down at any time. It was such an old man that made all the powerhouses in the Taoist palace bow and greet him respectfully. "Greetings, Uncle Master." "Greetings, Uncle Master." As the only 8th level powerhouse in the sect, the old man had dedicated his life to Xuanzong. He used divination to reach the Dao integration stage and divined all the heavenly secrets for the sect. Xuanzong's strength was inseparable from the old man's guidance. The heavenly secrets were hard to predict to begin with. Divining people was already extremely difficult, let alone divining the fate of the number 1 sect of the Taoist sect. For more than 100 years, Elder Tian Jizi had made great contributions to the sect with his unpredictable divination skills. However, he had also suffered a backlash from the heavenly Dao. He had lost his sight and suffered injuries that were difficult to recover from. He was Xuanzong's disciple, including the 7th level elders, and was the most respected existence in their hearts. The old man walked in front of everyone and said slowly, while Miao Yunzi is traveling, Dao Qingzi will temporarily be in charge of the sect's affairs. Since Uncle Master Tian Jizi had spoken, no one in the sect would object. Dao Qingzi was delighted and immediately cupped his hands. Yes, Uncle Master. As expected, after the old man spoke, no one objected. They all bowed and said, yes, Uncle Master. No one in Xuanzong doubted Uncle Master Tian Jizi's words. His divination skills were unparalleled in the world. He didn't even need to explain his orders because he could see the future that no one else could. The old man looked at Dao Qingzi and said, Xuanzong's future is in your hands. Dao Qingzi's expression was solemn. He said, I will definitely manage the sect well and not disappoint Uncle Master. Not long after, in the sky above the eastern sea, Miao Dun looked at Miao Yunzi and asked, You're leaving just like that? Grandmaster didn't pass the position to Uncle Master Dao Qingzi because his temperament wasn't suitable to be the sect leader. He was worried that he would completely destroy Xuanzong. Once you leave, Xuanzong will be able to do whatever he wants. Miao Yunzi said, This is Uncle Master's intention. Don't you trust him? Miao Dun was silent for a long time before he said, I agree with Uncle Master's every decision. Only this time. But he can see much further than us. Is Uncle Master Dao Qingzi really Xuanzong's future? In a dead silent space, Tian Jizi sat cross-legged on the withered grass. He closed his eyes and made a gesture of pinching his fingers. Soon, a trace of blood flowed out from his mouth. In this space, the grass and trees became even more withered and yellow. Tian Jizi slowly opened his eyes and murmured, There can be no construction without destruction. Only by seeking life in death can there be a sliver of fate. In the sky above the eastern sea, on the huge spirit boat, Li Mu had already learned the identity of the old man in Xuanzong. Tian Jizi was the only elder of the Tian generation in Xuanzong. He was also the elder with the highest seniority in Taoism. With his unfathomable divination skills, he had helped Taoism avoid several catastrophes in his life. One of the important reasons why diabolism did not dare to invade on a large scale was that Tian Jizi had not yet fallen. But this was not a reason for Xuanzong to bully others. Li Mu had promised Xiaobai that he would let her personally avenge the death of her clan members. He had left Xuanzong today, but the matter between him and Xuanzong had only just begun. Li Mu contacted Xian Jizi with a communication talisman and told him that he was going to rebuild the Fulu Pavilion in Chengdu. Li Mu did not intend to be so ruthless, but now that things had come to this, he no longer needed to give Xuanzong any face. At this moment, a large portion of the Zhu province cultivators in Xuanzong had reserved the Fulu Pavilion. They would come to Great Zhou's Chengdu to collect talismans within 3 months. The price was so low that it defied common sense. If others were to write talismans, they would naturally lose out. But if Li Mu did it himself, he would make a great profit. He wanted to build a cultivation market square in Chengdu that was even larger than Xuanzong. The imperial court would only take a maximum of 10% of the profits from the peddlers in the market square. He would also build a Dao field next to the market square and invite experts from the Department of Worship to preach the Dao every few days. The market square and Dao field would be open all year round. With the imperial court's influence and Chengdu's excellent location at the center of the Zhu continent, this Daoist exchange meeting in Xuanzong would be the last. When they passed by Chengdu, Li Mu and Xiaobai got off the flying boat first. The two Taishang elders and Yuzenzi continued north to return to the ancestral court. As soon as Li Mu stepped into the house, the space in the courtyard fluctuated. The Empress walked out with Mr. Mei and Sheng Wanli. Li Mu walked forward and said, Your Majesty. Zhou Yi said with a sullen face, I know. She walked to Xiaobai and hugged her gently, saying, Sister will avenge you. Xuanzong didn't even give face to the Fulu school, let alone the great Zhou court. Li Mu walked forward and said, Your Majesty, please calm down. Xuanzong is powerful. This matter needs to be discussed at length. Zhou Yi said indifferently, I won't be so impulsive. She looked at Mr. Mei and asked, Have you found out? Mr. Mei nodded and said, Yes, Xuanzong has a total of 23 orthodoxies in the Great Zhou. They are scattered in the 5 counties in the east. Like the 6 sects of Tao, there was not only one orthodoxy. In addition to the ancestral court, there were also many subsects in charge of providing fresh blood to the ancestral court. Many disciples of the ancestral court were promoted from these subsects. Generally speaking, the Great Zhou court would provide convenience for these subsects. For example, they would be given some blessed land with abundant spiritual energy as a mountain gate for them to use for free. Zhou Yi said coldly, "Order the 5 counties to take back the land the court gave them. Tell them to get lost. From now on, there is no Xuanzong Taoist field in the Great Zhou." Chapter 540. Yantai County, Mount Qingshu. In the current cultivation world, Taoism is the most powerful school. There are 6 schools and countless schools. Most of these schools can be regarded as branches of the 6 schools and have the same Taoist tradition as one of the 6 schools. Among them, Mount Qingshu in Yantai County is an important Xuanzong Taoist school. The Xuanzong Ancestral Court is located outside the East Sea and is isolated from the mainland. It is very inconvenient for it to do things, such as recruiting disciples and transmitting messages, which are all done by external Taoist schools. As the Taoist school of Xuanzong, the number 1 school of Taoism, the Qingshu school has an extremely high status in Yantai County. It has about 100 disciples. Its headmaster is a peak creation stage expert and is an elder of the Hua generation in Xuanzong. Xuanzong has a revered status in the cultivation world. The Great Zhou Court also opens the doors to them to set up Taoist schools in various counties and gives them extremely preferential treatment in several eastern counties. Not only does it give them famous mountains and caves to use as gates, it also uses the court's resources to build Taoist temples for them and recommend extremely talented disciples for them, etc. Today, a flying boat suddenly flies towards Mount Qingshu. On the flying boat are several cultivators with high levels of power. They fly to the sky above Mount Qingshu, then put away the flying boat and land. The Qingshu temple's guarding disciples recognize that the newcomer is the Yantai County governor. They step forward and say, "Sir, please wait here for a moment. I'll go to the temple to report to the abbot." The Qingshu temple is backed by Xuanzong, so it does not care about ordinary people. Even if it is an official of Yantai County or a cultivator below the 6th level who comes to visit, they must wait outside the gate. But this time, the Yantai County governor does not wait here. He just waves his hand indifferently and says, "No need." His face darkens. He says, "Do it." Boom. A Yantai County governor picks up a huge hammer, flies up and smashes it fiercely on the Qingshu school's gate. Under this blow, the Qingshu school's lofty gate, together with the huge plaque with the 3 words Qingshu School written on it, shatters and collapses with a loud rumble. The 2 guarding disciples are already dumbfounded. Looking at the collapsed gate, their lips trembling, they cannot even say a word. Several silhouettes fly out from inside the Taoist temple. A furious voice says, "How dare you? Which thug dares to break into my Qingshu mountain school?" A man in a Taoist robe flew out of the temple. When he saw who it was, his expression changed and he asked in shock, "County Governor Qin, are you crazy?" The Yantai County governor stood in the air and said faintly, "His Majesty has decreed that from today onwards, Xuanzong Taoist temples are prohibited within the Great Zhou." "Then where do you want us to go?" the man asked furiously. The Yantai County chief says expressionlessly, "This is your own business. I'll give you a day's time to quickly move out of Mount Qingshu. Otherwise, the county office will take coercive measures. At that time, anyone who dares to obstruct the court's official business will be killed without mercy." The man in the Daoist robe had a gloomy expression. The Yantai County chief did not seem to be joking, and it was impossible for him to make such a joke. This time, the Great Zhou court is serious. This is a big matter for both the Qingshu school and Xuanzong. He immediately flew back to the Qingshu mountain school, took out his communication magic tool, and contacted the ancestral court. At the same time, the great meeting hall of the Xuanzong ancestral court has already become a pot of porridge. The Qingshu school sent a message. The Great Zhou court gave them a day's time to move out. This is too much. The Tianxin school just sent people. They said their mountain gate was smashed by the Nanyang County governor and the Great Zhou Court wants to occupy their Taoist temple to raise chickens and ducks. The Cave Abyss School was also asked to move out. Why did the Great Zhou Court suddenly attack my Xuanzong? Today, all of Xuanzong's Taoist temples in Great Zhou were given an ultimatum by the Great Zhou Court. They were ordered to move out within a day. It seemed that the Great Zhou Court wanted to expel Xuanzong's Taoist temples and drive them overseas. Dao Qingzi had only been in charge of Xuanzong for 2 days, and this happened. This made his expression extremely ugly. He said coldly, "What is the Great Zhou Court trying to do?" At this time, a Xuanzong elder stepped forward and said, "Martial Granduncle, this must have something to do with Ling Jizi of the Fulu School." Dao Qingzi felt a headache when he heard this name. His reputation was completely ruined by this person. This person made him lose face in front of all the cultivators in the world. Dao Qingzi wanted nothing more than to cut him into pieces. He asked in a low voice, "What does this have to do with him?" The Xuanzong elder Taoist priest said, "Martial Granduncle, you may not know this, but Ling Jizi is not only a second-generation disciple of the Fulu School, but he is also an important official of the Great Zhou. He has authority in his hands. There are even rumors that he is the exclusive property of the Great Zhou Empress." Perhaps because he suffered a loss in Xuanzong, the Great Zhou Empress became angry and took revenge on Xuanzong for her lover. Regardless of the reason, the Great Zhou Court's actions did not sit well with Xuanzong. These dozens of Taoist temples were very important to Xuanzong. They were responsible for providing the sect with new blood. The Great Zhou Court's expulsion of these Taoist temples from the country would not affect Xuanzong too much in the short term. However, in the long term, it was a plan to remove the firewood from under the cauldron. As long as Xuanzong opened his mouth, countless people in the cultivation world would join him. However, geniuses needed to be nurtured from a young age. If they missed the opportunity, it would be very difficult for them to become a top expert in the future. In the face of the Great Zhou Court's coercion, Dao Qingzi was silent for a moment. Then, he said, "Move a few more islands and temporarily settle them here. Xuanzong has been passed down for thousands of years and has seen many dynasties change. If the Zhou dynasty thinks that they can challenge Xuanzong, I don't mind supporting a new ruler of Zhu province." No one expected Ling Jizi's revenge to come so quickly. All of Xuanzong's Taoist temples were expelled from the country, and a good exchange meeting was ruined. In just a few days, 30% of the cultivators left for Shendu of the Great Zhou. It would not be long before what happened in Xuanzong in the past 2 days spread throughout the cultivation world of Zhu province. As the #1 sect of Taoism, they had lost all face. Xuanzong no longer had a foothold in Great Zhou. At this time, a group of cultivators came from the Thousand Fox Nation in the distant Life province. Ever since the Thousand Fox country and the Great Zhou dynasty had formed an alliance, they had opened up a trade route to each other. Zhejiang County and the Thousand Fox country had even opened up a trade route. Various large sects and families had gradually begun to do business with the demon country. They used spiritual jades, magic treasures, pills, and other items to trade for the Yao nation's abundant spiritual medicines and profited a lot. In the imperial palace, Illusion Princess paced around in her chambers and muttered to herself, "Humph, it's been so long, and he still hasn't come to see me. He doesn't recognize me after he's done with me. Bastard." At this time, Fox 6 suddenly rushed in and said, "Your Majesty, I just heard something from those human cultivators." Illusion Princess said angrily, "I don't want to hear it now." Fox 6 said, "It's about Li Mu." Illusion Princess immediately looked up. "Speak." Fox 6 said slowly, "I heard a few human cultivators discussing something. They said that a few days ago, Li Mu and Xuanzong had a conflict. Even the 7th realm elders of the 2 sects were alerted." Fox 6 described Xuanzong's matter in detail. After hearing this, Illusion Princess was furious. She gritted her teeth and said, "Damn it, how dare they bully my man. I'll bring people to flatten their sect." Fox 6 hurriedly advised, "Your Majesty, don't be rash. Xuanzong is the most powerful sect in Zhu province. They have 5 7th realm cultivators, and rumor has it that they even have 8th realm cultivators in their sect. Let alone us, even the Empress of Great Zhou can't touch Xuanzong. Oh, right, there's someone who wants to trade spiritual medicines with us. It's Xuanzong's disciple. At the entrance of the palace, more than 10 human cultivators were waiting. Although Zhou province was vast and had abundant resources, there were also many people. The spiritual medicines sold everywhere were often expensive and priceless. However, the Yao nation was different. This place was rich in spiritual medicines, and the demons didn't know how to refine pills or write talismans. They could buy or trade spiritual medicines they needed at a very low price. Standing at the front of the crowd was a man in a Taoist robe. The cultivators tacitly kept their distance from him. Xuanzong's disciples were high and mighty. They didn't want to get close to them even if they didn't look at them. Not long after, a beautiful demoness walked in from inside. She glanced at the crowd and asked, "Who's Xuanzong's disciple?" The cultivators sighed in their hearts. Xuanzong was indeed Xuanzong. Even in the desolate Yao nation, Xuanzong's disciples had the privilege of being received first. The man in the Taoist robe stood out. He raised his head and said arrogantly, "I am." The beautiful female demon looked at him and confirmed, "You're Xuanzong's disciple?" The man puffed out his chest and said, "Xuanzong, Hua Xuanzi." Fox 6's gaze turned cold. She said indifferently, "Except for this Hua something from Xuanzong, everyone can go in." Hua Xuanzi was stunned. He asked, "What about me?" Fox 6 looked at him and said coldly, "I'll give you 3 breaths. Get out of here and tell your sect that Xuanzong's disciples are not welcome in Xinhu Nation. The next time you dare to step in here, I'll break your legs. Get out." Chapter 541. The cultivators in front of the Palace of Thousand Fox were stunned. They did not know what was going on. Xuanzong's disciples were respected wherever they went, but they were being targeted in the Yao nation. While Hua Xuanzi was still stunned, Hu Lu had already started counting down. 1, 2, 3, as soon as she finished her last word, several palace guards flew out. Several beams of Dharma spells engulfed Hua Xuanzi. Hua Xuanzi was Xuanzong's disciple after all. He instantly retreated. He floated in the air and said with a gloomy face, "Do you know what you're doing? How dare you treat Xuanzong like this? Have you foreseen the consequences?" A level 6 demonic corpse flew out of the palace. Hua Xuanzi shut his mouth completely when he sensed the powerful aura. He turned around and ran. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. He had to hurry back to the sect and tell the elders what had happened here. The other 10 or so cultivators slowly walked into the palace. The first thing they saw was a human statue. There was also a similar statue at the city gate of Thousand Fox Nation. The appearance of 2 human statues in the Yao nation reminded them of a rumor. It was said that the current queen of Thousand Fox Nation, the ruler of half of the Yao nation, had an extraordinary relationship with an important minister in the Great Zhou. When they saw the 2 statues, they connected it to the conflict between Li Mu and Xuanzong. Then, they connected it to Thousand Fox Nation's rejection of Xuanzong. They knew that the rumor was not just a rumor. In the bedroom, Phantom Princess said to the voice transmission instrument unhappily, "You didn't even tell me about such a big thing. Who do you think I am?" Divine Capital, Li Mansion. Li Mu glanced at Lu Hanyan, who had just returned to Divine Capital. She was talking to Wan Wan and Xiao Bai. He said, "It's not a big deal, so I didn't want to tell you." Phantom Princess did not dwell on the matter. She asked, "When will you come to see me?" Li Mu whispered, "I have a lot of things to do in the next few months. When I'm done, I'll go see you." Illusion Princess rolled around on the bed and asked with a red face, "I missed you." "Did you miss me?" Lu Hanyan had already noticed this. If he dared to flirt with her here, he would die here today. Li Mu whispered, "It's not convenient now. I'll contact you later." By the time he put away the sound-transmitting Dharma artifact, Lu Hanyan had already walked over. She looked at Li Mu and said indifferently, "Come with me." Li Mu followed her into the room and said, "I bought some clothes for you. See if there's anything you like." Lu Hanyan sat on the chair and said, don't worry. Li Mu continued, a few days ago, we saw Wan Wan and her parents and family members in the Immortals' capital. They were the same as before. In order to prevent Wan Wan from seeing them sad, I sent people to chase them away. Lu Hanyan nodded and said, well done. Then she looked at Li Mu and asked, who will you contact later? Although Li Mu had been hiding it from the Empress, he did not plan to hide it from Lu Hanyan. He looked up at her and said, there's something I need to confess to you. The accident in Thousand Fox Nation had always been something that Li Mu was too ashamed to talk about. As an indomitable man, he withstood countless temptations, but in the end, he was defeated by a fox. Lu Hanyan's face darkened and asked, does Xiaobai know? Li Mu shook his head and said, I haven't told her yet. Listen to me. That was really an accident. I didn't expect. Lu Hanyan stood up and snorted coldly. She said, it's useless to explain to me. You'd better explain to Xiaobai. She walked out of the room and left Li Mu alone. Li Mu decided not to tell Xiaobai that he already had another fox by his side. The most important thing now was to let her take revenge for the murder of her clan and her grandmother. This had become an obsession in her heart. The Heavenly Fox clan's obsession with revenge was so deep that her cultivation had been stagnant for a long time. Li Mu walked to the yard and asked them to choose a few sets of clothes. Then he went to Changle Palace. As soon as he took out the clothes, Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, they chose these, didn't they? She got an affirmative answer from Li Mu's expression. She snorted softly and said, I knew it. If they didn't choose the leftovers, you wouldn't give them to me, Li Mu said helplessly, Your Majesty, you misunderstood me. I have already chosen a few sets for you. I just wanted to let Your Majesty see if there are any that you like. He took out a few other sets of clothes and said, I have already chosen these for Your Majesty. Zhou Yi soon forgave Li Mu and went to the inner hall to try on the clothes. Li Mu looked at Mr. Mei and Shengguan Li and said, you can also choose a few sets. Although they are not treasures, they look good on you. Mr. Mei glanced at him indifferently and said, they only gave us the leftovers after others chose. Li Mu waved his hand and put away all the clothes. He said indifferently, take it or leave it. Mr. Mei said angrily, you heartless man. I even asked Zhu Wei to help you get information. How can you treat me like this? Li Mu was a little slow in putting away the clothes. He asked, what information? Mr. Mei glanced at him indifferently and asked, do you want to know the background of Xiaobai's enemy? Li Mu said, Xuanzong's fourth-generation disciple. Mr. Mei crossed his arms and said, are you stupid? Xuanzong's fourth-generation disciples are also born and raised by their parents. I mean, what country he is from, what his identity is, and who else is in his family. Li Mu paused and said, actually, I was just joking. I have already looked out for Sister Mei's clothes. These clothes are very suitable for your temperament. Shengguan Li asked, what about me? Li Mu waved his hand and said, go away. You can choose after Sister Mei finishes. Shengguan Li took out a secret document from her sleeve and said, I have the information from Zhu Wei's investigation. Li Mu took a deep breath and a smile appeared on his face again. He said, good Ali, how could I forget you? I was just joking just now. Of course you should choose first. With Sister Mei's age, there aren't many things here that she can wear. It won't be too late to choose later. In Changle Palace, Mr. Mei held some clothes and snorted, how can there be such a shameless person in the world? Shengguan Li glanced at him and said, a few days ago, you said that he dared to fight against transcendence with the Fate Realm. He was loyal and righteous. He was a trustworthy person. Li Mu held a secret document in his hand. It was sent from Xuanzong by Zhu Wei's spy. Li Mu did not expect that the imperial court spy would be placed in Xuanzong. This secret document recorded Qing Qingzi's identity in detail. Qing Qingzi's original name was Zhao Chen. He came from a cultivation family in Yan. The Yan kingdom was a small kingdom to the south of Zhuzhou. Its strength was very weak, far inferior to the Shen kingdom, the Jing kingdom, and the Yong kingdom. It was a vassal state of the Great Zhou. For the past 100 years, it had paid tribute to the Great Zhou in order to obtain the Great Zhou's protection and prevent other countries from annexing and invading it. Li Mu left the imperial palace and went directly to the Honglu temple. Since the last tribute, all the countries in the south, except Yong, had sent envoys to the divine capital. After receiving Li Mu's order, the Honglu temple official immediately sent for the Yan's envoy. A thin man quickly stepped into the room and said nervously, "What instructions does your excellency have for this humble subject?" Li Mu asked, "Can you get in touch with the Yan imperial family?" The thin man immediately nodded. "Your excellency, we can, Yan imperial family." The envoy sent a message from the Great Zhou's divine capital, causing the entire Yan imperial family to panic. The son of the Zhao family was fortunate enough to join Xuanzong. This was supposed to be the glory of the Zhao family and the Yan imperial family. Unexpectedly, he was wanted by the Great Zhou court. The Yan imperial family was a vassal state of the Great Zhou. The Great Zhou court directly sent the document to the Yan imperial family. As the most powerful country in Zhuzhou, if the Great Zhou was angry, a small country like the Yan imperial family would be silently reduced to ashes. After receiving the message from the Great Zhou court, the Yan imperial family immediately held an emergency meeting and made a decision in the shortest time possible. The order from the Great Zhou could not be disobeyed. The Yan imperial family personally issued a decree ordering the Zhao family to immediately recall Zhao Chen. In the Zhao family, after the messenger left, the head of the Zhao family snorted and threw the imperial decree on the ground. He stepped on it and said, "Bring me a sound-transmitting Dharma artifact. I want to ask Cheng for his opinion." Xuanzong. Qin Qingzi knelt before Dao Qingzi and said worriedly, "Grand Elder, the Great Zhou court is pressuring the Yan imperial family to force my father to hand me over. What should I do? A small country dares to ignore the Xuanzong." Dao Qingzi stood up and waved his sleeve. He said indifferently, "In that case, let the Yan imperial family perish."